there is a small piece of parchment that tells you everything about Blaise Pascal. He wrote on it in a state of terror and joy one night in November 1654, recording 2 hours of experience so overwhelming he had no language adequate to it. Then he sewed it into the lining of his coat. Not published it, not locked it away, sewed it to his body, where it stayed, hidden against his chest, for the remaining 8 years of his life. It was found only after his death. What he wrote is called the Memorial, and it reads like no philosophical document before or since. It begins not with an argument but with a single word, written twice in capitals: fire. Then a rush of fragments: God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not the God of philosophers and scholars. Then single words, barely sentences: certainty, feeling, joy, peace. It reads like notes made by someone still trembling, reaching for language adequate to an experience that ordinary language cannot hold. The man who wrote that had, at 19, built the world's first mechanical calculator. He had co-invented probability theory with Fermat, giving humanity its first rigorous tools for reasoning under uncertainty. He had conducted experiments that overturned Aristotelian physics, climbing mountains with barometers to prove that the atmosphere had weight and that above it lay nothing, genuine void, genuine emptiness, the vacuum that ancient philosophy had declared impossible. By any measure, Pascal was the supreme rationalist of his age, the kind of mind that does not accept what it cannot demonstrate. And yet the Memorial, this is the problem Pascal hands us before he has said anything else. Not the problem of faith versus reason, because that framing is too easy, too comfortable, too available as a way of not thinking. The real problem is harder. What does it mean that the same mind, capable of the most rigorous mathematical demonstration, also insisted that the most important truths lie beyond what demonstration can reach? Was this a contradiction? A failure of nerve? Or was it the conclusion that his rationalism, pursued far enough, actually forced upon him? Pascal's answer unfolds across mathematics, psychology, theology, and a forensic dissection of how human beings actually live. Not how we imagine we live, not how philosophy says we ought to live, but the specific texture of our restlessness, our self-deception, our terror of sitting alone in a quiet room. He is one of the few thinkers who understood both the power of mathematical certainty and the precise location of its limits, who mapped human greatness and human misery not as opposites, but as two expressions of the same underlying nature, who applied the logic of probability to the question of God with a rigor that still unsettles people 3.5 centuries later. The key to all of it is understanding how Pascal thought. Not what he concluded, but the method, the particular kind of mind he brought to every question, and what that mind discovered when it looked honestly at its own foundations. Because Pascal's most important insight begins not with God or with human nature, but with mathematics itself, and with a discovery he made about certainty that turned out to change everything. Part 1. The Foundation of Method. At 16, Pascal proved something that had escaped mathematicians for centuries. A theorem about conic sections so elegant and unexpected that Descartes, upon seeing it, refused to believe a teenager had produced it. This early brilliance revealed to Pascal something crucial about human rational capacity. Within certain carefully defined domains, the mind can achieve perfect clarity and absolute certainty through rigorous logical demonstration. In his treatise De l'esprit géométrique, Pascal articulates what he calls the geometric mind, esprit géométrique, a mode of thinking that operates through precise definitions, clear principles, and inexorable logical deduction. This geometric approach enabled his revolutionary contributions to probability theory, his elegant work on the cycloid, and his mathematical analysis of games of chance. Pascal recognized that mathematical demonstration provides a model of human reasoning at its most powerful and precise. When properly applied, mathematical thinking achieves results that are both absolutely certain and practically useful. Pascal's correspondence with Fermat on probability theory illustrates this geometric precision applied to uncertainty itself. They developed methods for calculating odds and expected values, even when complete information remains unavailable. This work represents a stunning intellectual achievement, using mathematical reasoning to make rational decisions under conditions of uncertainty. Pascal could determine the fair division of stakes in an interrupted game, or calculate the expected value of various gambling strategies, all through rigorous mathematical analysis. Yet, Pascal understood that mathematical thinking, whilst supremely powerful within its sphere, cannot address all aspects of human experience. Even geometry must begin with definitions and axioms that cannot themselves be proven geometrically. Every mathematical system rests upon foundational principles that lie beyond mathematical demonstration. This recognition becomes crucial for Pascal's broader philosophical project. If even our most certain knowledge depends upon unprovable first principles, what does this reveal about the nature of human understanding? The geometric mind represents human rational capacity, operating at its highest level of precision and certainty. But Pascal's mathematical work paradoxically revealed the boundaries of mathematical certainty itself. His probability theory showed how rational decision-making can proceed, even when absolute proof remains impossible. This insight would prove essential when Pascal turned his attention to questions that mathematics cannot reach: the nature of human existence, the reality of God, and the proper response to our condition between two infinites. Pascal's epistemological revolution begins with a startling recognition. The mind possesses two distinct, yet equally legitimate ways of knowing. Beyond the geometric mind's methodical demonstrations lies what he calls the esprit de finesse, the intuitive mind that grasps truth through immediate perception rather than logical steps. This is not mystical speculation, but rigorous analysis of how human knowledge actually operates. The heart has its reasons which reason does not know, Pascal writes in the Pensée, identifying a cognitive process that proves both universal and remarkably reliable. The intuitive mind operates through what Pascal calls finesse, a sensitivity that perceives principles directly, rather than deriving them through chains of reasoning. Consider how you recognize a friend's distress in their expression, appreciate the beauty of a sunset, or sense moral obligation in a particular situation. These judgments arise not through syllogistic reasoning, but through immediate perception of complex wholes. The principles involved are, in Pascal's phrase, felt rather than seen. They present themselves to consciousness with compelling clarity, yet resist reduction to mathematical demonstration. This immediate knowledge proves extraordinarily sophisticated. When we encounter another person, we instantly perceive layers of meaning: their emotional state, their intentions, their character, through subtle cues that no algorithm could process. We appreciate artistic beauty through direct aesthetic response that encompasses formal elements, emotional resonance, and cultural significance simultaneously. We recognize moral claims through intuitive grasp of human dignity, suffering, and flourishing that operates faster and more comprehensively than ethical calculation. Pascal insists this knowledge accesses objective features of reality rather than mere subjective preference. The universality of certain aesthetic responses across cultures, the reliability of interpersonal intuition, the convergence of moral insight among different peoples, all suggest The intuitive mind perceives genuine aspects of the world's structure. The heart has its order. The mind has its own, which uses principles and demonstrations. The heart has another, Pascal observes, indicating two complementary cognitive orders rather than competing systems. The relationship between geometric and intuitive minds proves complementary rather than antagonistic. Even mathematical reasoning depends on intuitive grasp of first principles. We cannot prove that contradictory statements cannot both be true, yet this principle underlies all logical demonstration. We recognize the validity of modus ponens not through further argument but through direct intellectual perception. Principles are felt, propositions are proved, and both with certainty though by different ways, Pascal explains, showing how complete knowledge requires both approaches. The geometric mind excels at developing implications, testing consistency, and extending insights through systematic analysis. But it requires foundations that intuition provides. The immediate grasp of starting points, the recognition of relevant connections, the sense of when arguments achieve genuine insight rather than mere formal validity. Attempts to reduce all knowledge to mathematical demonstration actually impoverish understanding by eliminating the very foundations that make demonstration possible. This epistemological framework prepares Pascal's revolutionary approach to religious knowledge. If divine reality exists and seeks relationship with humans, it would naturally address the whole person rather than merely the calculating intellect. Pascal distinguishes between the God of philosophers and scholars, known through abstract reasoning about first causes and perfect beings, and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, encountered through personal relationship that engages both mind and heart. Pascal discovered something unsettling at the heart of human knowledge, even the most rigorous mathematical reasoning, the kind that had made his reputation as a prodigy, must begin with first principles that cannot themselves be demonstrated. In his treatise, De l'esprit géométrique, he revealed the uncomfortable truth that every definition depends on prior terms. Every proof depends on prior principles, creating an infinite regress that must be stopped somewhere. We know that we do not dream, Pascal observed, although we cannot prove it by reason. This recognition emerged directly from his mathematical work. Even Euclidean geometry, that monument to logical precision, begins with axioms accepted as self-evident rather than proven. A point has no dimensions. A line has length but no width. Parallel lines never meet. These foundational truths anchor all geometric reasoning, yet they themselves rest on intuitive acceptance rather than logical demonstration. Pascal realized that mathematics, far from being purely rational, depends on commitments that transcend pure reason. The implications cascade through all human knowledge. Our most certain truths, mathematical and logical principles, ultimately rest on foundations that cannot be established through logical demonstration alone. Consider the principle of non-contradiction. We cannot prove that something cannot both be and not be simultaneously without already assuming this principle in our reasoning. The reliability of memory, the existence of an external world, the validity of inductive reasoning. All these fundamental assumptions that make knowledge possible cannot themselves be proven without circular reasoning. Pascal captured this with characteristic precision. The ultimate end of reason is to recognize that there are an infinite number of things which surpass it. This is not skepticism but intellectual honesty about the structure of knowledge itself. Reason operates magnificently within its domain, but it cannot establish its own foundations. We must accept certain truths not because we can prove them but because they make proof possible. This epistemological insight becomes the cornerstone of Pascal's broader philosophical project. If even mathematical certainty requires acceptance of unprovable first principles, then religious faith's dependence on commitment beyond demonstration does not disqualify it as a form of knowledge. The mathematician who accepts geometric axioms and the believer who accepts religious truths both make foundational commitments that enable further reasoning. Faith is different from proof, Pascal wrote. One is human, the other is a gift of God. Pascal thus prepares the ground for his revolutionary argument that faith and reason operate in different but complementary domains. Neither can establish its own ultimate foundations through its own methods. Both depend on acceptance of principles that transcend their demonstrative power. This recognition transforms the relationship between religious belief and rational inquiry from opposition to mutual dependence. The existential implications run deeper still. Pascal's analysis reveals something profound about human nature itself. We are beings who must commit ourselves beyond what we can fully demonstrate. Every act of knowledge, every moment of reasoning, every assertion of truth involves a leap beyond pure, logical necessity. The heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing, not as anti-rational sentiment, but as recognition that even rationality depends on commitments that transcend rational proof. This creates the fundamental tension of human existence. We are rational creatures whose rationality depends on non-rational foundations. We seek certainty whilst living perpetually between knowledge and mystery, compelled to make commitments that exceed our capacity for demonstration. Pascal had discovered that even in mathematics, that realm of apparent certainty, we encounter the limits that define our condition as finite beings grasping for infinite truth. Part 2. The Two Infinites. Let man contemplate the whole of nature in her full and lofty majesty. Let him turn his gaze away from the lowly objects around him. Let him behold the dazzling light set like an eternal lamp to light up the universe. Pascal opens his meditation on cosmic scale with this breathtaking invitation to see ourselves truly. Writing in the wake of Galileo's telescopic revelations and the Copernican revolution, Pascal grasped what these discoveries meant for human self-understanding with startling clarity. The Earth, once the stable center of creation, had become a mere point spinning through infinite space. Human civilization, all our wars and loves and philosophies, reduced to a brief flicker on a cosmic speck. Pascal felt the full vertigo of this recognition. Through his scientific work, he understood the mathematical precision governing celestial mechanics, the vast distances between stars, the incomprehensible scale of the universe revealed by the new astronomy. The comfortable medieval cosmos, with its nested spheres and human-scaled dimensions, had shattered. In its place stretched an infinite expanse that operated according to mathematical laws utterly indifferent to human purposes, human values, human existence itself. This revelation could easily lead to despair or nihilism, as Pascal readily acknowledged. We appear to be nothing in comparison with the infinite, everything in comparison with nothing, a mean between nothing and everything. The scientific revolution had stripped away traditional assumptions about human centrality and importance. We are virtually nothing compared to the infinite expanse of space and time, seemingly accidental specks in an indifferent cosmos that operates without regard for our hopes, fears, or moral aspirations. Yet Pascal discovered in this very recognition something remarkable about human nature. The fact that we can contemplate our cosmic insignificance reveals our unique position in existence. Man is only a reed, the weakest in nature, but he is a thinking reed. Here lies Pascal's profound insight. Only humans, among all known beings, can understand their place in the cosmic order and grasp their own insignificance. This capacity for self-reflection and cosmic perspective paradoxically demonstrates our distinctive dignity. Whilst we are physically negligible, we are the only beings capable of understanding the universe's scale and comprehending our position within it. The vast stars and galaxies, for all their impressive magnitude, possess no consciousness of their own existence or place in the cosmic order. They cannot contemplate infinity or recognize their own nature. This form of greatness, Pascal argues, even the immense cosmos cannot claim. The implications run deeper still. Pascal uses our cosmic insignificance not to diminish human dignity, but to establish it on proper foundations. Our greatness lies not in physical size or power, but in consciousness and understanding. Even if the universe destroys us, man would still be more noble than that which kills him, because he knows that he dies, and the advantage the universe has over him. The universe knows nothing of this. Knowledge, awareness, the capacity for reflection, these constitute our true nobility. This analysis reveals something fundamental about human nature that Pascal will develop throughout his exploration of our condition. We exist between two infinites, bounded not only by the infinite expanse of space and time, but by another infinite that presses equally upon human existence. Our cosmic insignificance, properly understood, illuminates rather than diminishes our unique position in the order of being. Pascal's meditation on cosmic vastness finds its counterpoint in an equally vertiginous journey toward infinite smallness. He invites us to consider a might in the smallness of its body parts that are incomparably smaller. This is not mere scientific curiosity, but philosophical revelation. Pascal's work with early microscopy and his mathematical understanding of infinite divisibility revealed that just as we are dwarfed by cosmic infinity, we are equally overwhelmed by the infinite complexity dwelling within the smallest observable things. Every particle yields to further division, every process dissolves into smaller components, every explanation demands deeper explanations. The mite's leg contains muscles. The muscles contain fibers. The fibers contain smaller elements, extending toward an infinitude of subdivision that our instruments and imagination cannot follow. Pascal experienced this directly through his scientific investigations. His studies of atmospheric pressure, which seemed to promise clear mechanical explanations, instead opened cascading questions about the fundamental nature of matter, space, and the void. This double limitation exposes the inherent boundaries of human understanding with startling clarity. Pascal captures our predicament perfectly. We sail on a vast expanse, ever drifting uncertainly, blown to and fro. Whenever we think we have a fixed point to which we can cling and make fast, it shifts and leaves us behind. Human knowledge is bounded on both sides. We cannot comprehend the ultimate nature of either the infinitely large or infinitely small. Every advance in understanding reveals greater complexity rather than final answers. Yet Pascal uses this recognition not to promote skepticism, but to establish appropriate humility about reason's scope. He distinguishes carefully between acknowledging limits and abandoning knowledge altogether. It is not good to be too free, he observes. It is not good to have all one needs. His mathematical work with limits and infinitesimals taught him that meaningful knowledge remains possible, even when complete knowledge is impossible. We can understand relationships, patterns, and local truths without grasping ultimate foundations. This bounded position between infinites reveals something profound about human existence. We occupy a unique middle position that is neither accidental nor meaningless. Pascal's insight into man's disproportion identifies not a flaw, but a distinctive feature enabling a particular kind of understanding unavailable to beings that might be either purely finite or purely infinite. Our limitations become the very ground of our dignity, positioning us uniquely to recognize both our dependence and our capacity for relationship with transcendent reality that exceeds our comprehension whilst remaining accessible to our experience. Pascal's profound meditation on the two infinites reveals perhaps his most startling insight about human nature. Our position between nothingness and everything is not a cosmic accident or cruel joke, but the very foundation of our distinctive greatness. For, after all, what is man in nature? A nothing compared to the infinite, a whole compared to the nothing, a middle point between all and nothing. This intermediate position, which might seem to render us insignificant specks in an incomprehensible universe, actually establishes our unique dignity and enables forms of understanding impossible for any other known beings. Pascal demonstrates that this middle position creates a remarkable capacity for cosmic perspective. We alone, amongst all creatures we know, can contemplate both infinites and recognize our place between them. Animals cannot conceive of infinity. They remain trapped within immediate experience. If God exists, divine understanding would encompass all reality without the struggle of reaching beyond limitations. But humans occupy this extraordinary middle ground where we can think beyond our boundaries whilst remaining aware of them. This capacity for transcendent thought, emerging from our very limitations, paradoxically demonstrates powers that surpass anything else in the known universe. This intermediate status enables distinctively human forms of knowledge and relationship that would be impossible for purely finite or purely infinite beings. Because we are neither completely bounded like animals nor completely unbounded like God might be, we can understand both limitation and transcendence. We experience the tension between what we can grasp and what lies beyond our grasp, between what we can achieve and what we aspire to achieve. Pascal recognizes that our awareness of our boundaries paradoxically transcends those boundaries. We know more than we can fully comprehend, love beyond what we can possess, aspire beyond what we can achieve. This creates possibilities for relationships that transcend mere physical connection or logical necessity. The apparent problem of human limitation thus transforms into the foundation of human greatness. Pascal observes that man's greatness comes from knowing he is wretched. A tree does not know it is wretched. Self-awareness of our position between infinites demonstrates capacities that no other known beings possess. This awareness enables moral responsibility, because we can conceive of standards beyond immediate self-interest. It enables aesthetic appreciation, because we can recognize beauty that transcends utility. It enables scientific investigation, because we can pursue understanding for its own sake. It enables religious aspiration, because we can conceive of relationship with ultimate reality. All these distinctively human activities emerge from our peculiar intermediate status. Pascal's analysis establishes that humans are incomprehensible precisely because we combine elements that seem contradictory. We are finite yet aspiring to infinity, limited yet capable of transcending our limits through understanding, temporal yet capable of contemplating eternity. This paradoxical nature manifests throughout human experience, creating the fundamental tension that defines our condition and points toward questions about our ultimate destiny and purpose that mere philosophical analysis cannot resolve. Part 3. The Thinking Reed. Man is only a reed, the weakest in nature, Pascal's stark observation cuts through any romantic illusions about human strength and resilience. We can be destroyed by the smallest physical forces, a drop of water entering our lungs, a vapor carrying disease, the slightest accident ending our existence in an instant. This isn't philosophical hyperbole but biological fact. Our bodies, for all their remarkable complexity, remain utterly vulnerable to countless forces beyond our control. This recognition became intensely personal for Pascal himself. Chronic illness plagued his adult life, severe headaches that could last for days, stomach problems that made eating an ordeal, a constant awareness of mortality that shadowed his mathematical and scientific work. His correspondence reveals how physical weakness repeatedly interrupted his intellectual pursuits. The man who revolutionized probability theory and advanced our understanding of atmospheric pressure found his own atmospheric conditions, the delicate balance of health, perpetually unstable. Yet Pascal's analysis penetrates far deeper than obvious physical vulnerability. This fragility pervades our mental and emotional lives with equal thoroughness. We remain subject to changing moods we cannot predict, conflicting desires we cannot reconcile, inevitable suffering we cannot escape. As Pascal observed in his Pensées, we are so unfortunate that we can only take pleasure in a thing on condition of being annoyed if it turns out badly. Even our greatest achievements remain vulnerable to loss, our deepest relationships subject to change and disappointment, our most cherished beliefs open to doubt and revision. This comprehensive fragility reveals something fundamental about human nature. We are not self-sufficient beings, but creatures dependent on countless factors beyond our control. Pascal's analysis extends beyond obvious physical dependence to reveal our psychological dependence on social recognition, meaningful work, stable relationships, and coherent worldviews. Remove any of these supports, and our sense of well-being crumbles with remarkable speed. We depend on others to confirm our worth, on projects to give our lives meaning, on familiar patterns to maintain psychological stability. All our dignity consists in thought, Pascal argued, precisely because everything else about us remains subject to forces we cannot master. Our bodies fail, our circumstances change, our relationships end. But the very capacity to recognize and articulate this condition demonstrates something remarkable. The reed that knows it is weak possesses a form of awareness that transcends physical limitation. This recognition strips away the false pride that prevents us from seeing our true condition honestly. Pascal understood that acknowledging comprehensive fragility becomes the foundation for wisdom rather than despair. The greatness of man is great in that he knows himself to be wretched. This isn't masochistic self-flagellation, but clear-sighted recognition that opens us to forms of strength and support that transcend what we can achieve through our own efforts alone. Human fragility, properly understood, becomes not a limitation to overcome, but a condition to embrace with full awareness. Only by accepting our fundamental dependence can we begin to understand what forms of transcendence might actually be available to creatures like ourselves. Man is only a reed, the weakest in nature, but he is a thinking reed. It does not take the entire universe to crush him. A vapor, a drop of water, is enough to kill him. But even if the universe were to crush him, man would still be more noble than his slayer, because he knows that he is dying and the advantage the universe has over him. The universe knows nothing of this. Pascal's most celebrated insight reveals something extraordinary about our condition. Despite our comprehensive physical weakness, our vulnerability to disease, our brief lifespan, our inability to survive even minor cosmic events, we possess a capacity that elevates us above all other known beings. The power of thought transforms even our destruction into a form of victory over the forces that destroy us. This is no mere consolation philosophy. Pascal understood that thought operates according to entirely different principles than physical force. When a mountain crushes a person, the mountain exercises greater physical power. But the person who understands what is happening, who grasps the mathematical relationships governing the collision, who contemplates the meaning of mortality itself, demonstrates a form of superiority that physical force cannot touch or destroy. The scope of human thought reveals its remarkable nature. Through thinking, we transcend our immediate circumstances completely. We contemplate abstract mathematical truths that exist nowhere in the physical world. We understand probability relationships that govern events we will never witness. We grasp infinite series that extend beyond any possible physical measurement. Pascal's own intellectual achievements exemplify this transcendence. His ability to envision mechanical calculation, his insights into the geometry of chance, his contemplation of cosmic scale. These capacities demonstrate that thought accesses realities that physical power cannot reach. Thought enables distinctively human forms of relationship and understanding. Through thinking, we appreciate beauty that serves no survival function, recognize moral obligations that may demand self-sacrifice, form friendships based on shared understanding rather than mutual utility. We can even contemplate the possibility of relationship with divine reality. As Pascal observed, thought constitutes the greatness of man. This capacity enables us to understand not merely facts, but meanings, not simply causes, but purposes, not only what is, but what ought to be. This meaning-making capacity distinguishes humans fundamentally from all other known beings. Animals respond to their environment with remarkable sophistication, but they do not contemplate the nature of response itself. Natural forces operate with perfect consistency, but they do not understand the principles governing their operation. Only humans possess the extraordinary ability to step outside immediate experience and examine the conditions of experience itself. Pascal connected this insight to human dignity and responsibility. Since thought constitutes our distinctive greatness among all beings, we bear a fundamental obligation to think well and pursue truth rather than distraction or self-deception. All the dignity of man consists in thought, he insisted. This creates both unprecedented opportunity and unavoidable obligation. The opportunity to transcend physical limitation through understanding opens before us. But so does the obligation to use our highest capacity in service of truth rather than mere comfort or entertainment. The thinking reed must choose whether to fulfill its nature or betray it. Pascal presents us with a startling proposition. Because thought constitutes our distinctive greatness among all beings, we bear a fundamental moral duty to think well and pursue truth rather than flee into distraction. Let us then strive to think well, he declares. This is the principle of morality. This obligation stems from thought's unique dignity within the cosmic order. To waste our capacity for understanding is to betray what makes us human. Pascal saw this not as an abstract philosophical principle, but as a practical moral imperative that should guide our daily choices about how to spend our mental energy and attention. The duty emerges from our peculiar position between the two infinites. We alone among earthly creatures can contemplate our own existence, question our purpose, and seek understanding of reality beyond immediate survival needs. This capacity for reflection carries with it an inherent responsibility. Just as we would consider it morally wrong to waste precious resources or neglect important relationships, Pascal argues we commit a deeper betrayal when we squander our thinking on trivial pursuits, whilst avoiding the fundamental questions that our rational nature compels us to address. But what constitutes thinking well? in Pascal's framework. He distinguishes noble thinking from mere intellectual activity or academic exercise. Thinking well requires the courage to pursue truth even when it challenges our preferences or reveals uncomfortable realities about our condition. Pascal demonstrated this intellectual courage in his own scientific work, following evidence about atmospheric pressure and probability theory, despite challenging established authorities. His investigations into the vacuum and his mathematical innovations emerged from his commitment to follow reasoning wherever it led, regardless of conventional wisdom or personal comfort. Noble thinking demands wisdom about the proper scope and limits of different forms of reasoning. We must know where to doubt, where to feel certain, where to submit, Pascal observes. This discernment prevents both the arrogance of claiming certainty where doubt is appropriate and the paralysis of doubting where reasonable certainty is possible. The thinking reed must learn to bend without breaking, maintaining intellectual humility whilst still pursuing genuine understanding. The obligation to think nobly extends beyond individual benefit to our relationships and responsibilities to others. Pascal understood that clear thinking serves love. We cannot help others effectively if we remain confused about reality, and we cannot form genuine relationships if we deceive ourselves about our own nature and motivations. His insight that the heart has its reasons which reason does not know reveals how noble thinking encompasses both rigorous analysis and sensitive attention to the heart's knowledge. Intellectual integrity becomes a form of moral integrity. This moral dimension of thinking connects to Pascal's broader vision of human purpose and destiny. The duty to think well prepares us for deeper questions about meaning, purpose, and our relationship with transcendent reality that mere survival or pleasure-seeking cannot address. Man is made to think, Pascal declares. It is his whole dignity and his whole merit. Our capacity for thought distinguishes us not only from animals, but places us in a unique relationship with truth itself. Yet this obligation creates its own profound challenge. Noble thinking about our condition inevitably produces existential anxiety. Clear sight of our mortality, our limitations, and our cosmic insignificance generates the very discomfort that drives us toward distraction and diversion. The duty to think well, thus, requires us to resist our natural tendency to flee from uncomfortable truths into the numbing comfort of mindless entertainment or busy work. Part 4. The misery of human existence. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Pascal's stark observation cuts to the heart of a fundamental truth about human nature that he discovered through meticulous observation of himself and others. We are restless beings, constitutionally incapable of finding lasting satisfaction in any finite good. This restlessness manifests itself everywhere Pascal looked, in the wealthy merchant who accumulates fortune only to discover it brings no peace, in the scholar who masters knowledge yet finds it insufficient, in the lover who wins his beloved only to grow bored or anxious about losing her. Pascal catalogued these patterns with scientific precision. We pursue wealth but find it inadequate. We seek fame but discover it empty. We chase pleasure but experience it as fleeting. Even Pascal himself, despite extraordinary achievements in mathematics and science that might have provided lasting fulfillment, found himself confronting this same fundamental restlessness. His revolutionary work on probability, his contributions to geometry, his mechanical calculator, none of these accomplishments could satisfy the deeper longing that drove him. The pattern Pascal identified reveals something more troubling than simple human fickleness. We oscillate perpetually between the pain of want and the boredom of possession. We are so wretched, Pascal observed, that we can only take pleasure in a thing on condition of being annoyed if it turns out badly, as 1,000 things can and do turn out badly every hour. This creates a cruel paradox. Anticipation often provides more satisfaction than achievement. The cycle repeats across every domain of human experience. In relationships, we long for connection, achieve it, then find ourselves either taking it for granted or fearing its loss. In career pursuits, we strive for advancement, reach our goals, then discover new ambitions or feel empty despite our success. Even in religious and moral pursuits, we can fall into the same pattern. This universal restlessness suggests something fundamental about human nature itself. Pascal recognized that we seem designed for something beyond what finite existence can provide. There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man, he wrote, which cannot be filled by any created thing, but only by God, the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ. Our infinite longing within finite circumstances creates a structural mismatch that no rearrangement of finite goods can resolve. Pascal saw this mismatch not as a design flaw, but as evidence pointing toward human destiny. Our dissatisfaction with finite things becomes a sign of our true orientation rather than a psychological problem requiring solution. The restlessness that torments us simultaneously reveals both our misery and our greatness. We cannot find peace in our actual circumstances. This demonstrates our wretchedness. Yet we are the only known beings capable of longing for infinite good. This demonstrates our nobility. This analysis places human beings in a unique and paradoxical position. Our restlessness makes us wretched because we cannot achieve satisfaction within the bounds of finite existence. But this same restlessness makes us great because it points beyond those bounds toward infinite reality. Most humans, Pascal observed, respond to this existential tension through elaborate forms of escape and distraction, avoiding the deeper implications of their perpetual dissatisfaction. Pascal's most penetrating psychological insight emerged from observing a peculiar human compulsion, our desperate flight from solitude. He discovered what he termed diversion, divertissement, not merely as entertainment, but as humanity's primary strategy for avoiding the anxiety that comes from confronting our true condition. One have discovered that all the unhappiness of men arises from one single fact, Pascal observed, that they cannot stay quietly in their own chamber. This restlessness reveals something profound about human nature itself. Faced with mortality and the fundamental questions of existence, we instinctively turn to constant activity. Diversion becomes any pursuit that prevents us from facing the ultimate anxieties our condition generates, questions about meaning, purpose, and death that emerge whenever we stop moving. Pascal recognized that this flight operates below conscious awareness, driving us toward anything that fills the void of reflection. The examples Pascal identified span from obvious entertainment to seemingly noble pursuits. Gambling fascinated him not just mathematically but psychologically. Gamblers seek the excitement of risk to avoid the deeper anxiety of self-examination. Social pursuits, career ambition, political involvement, even intellectual work and religious activity can serve as elaborate escape mechanisms. The courtier's endless rounds of ceremony, the scholar's obsessive research, the merchant's relentless pursuit of profit, all function as sophisticated forms of avoidance. Pascal's genius lay in recognizing that diversion operates at every level of society. The only thing which consoles us for our miseries is diversion, he wrote. Diversion becomes misery because it prevents us from addressing the real sources of our unhappiness, whilst creating the illusion of progress or meaning. Consider Pascal's thought experiment about enforced solitude. Let anyone try it. Let him leave a king alone, with nothing to satisfy his senses, no care to occupy his mind, no company to divert him, no pleasures, no business, no diversion. And then, see if a king without diversion is a man full of wretchedness. Even the most powerful human being becomes miserable when stripped of distractions, forced to confront the existential void that diversion conceals. This reveals Pascal's profound insight into human psychology. If we could sit quietly alone without distractions, we would be compelled to face our cosmic position, suspended between nothingness and infinity, mortal yet capable of conceiving eternity, rational yet driven by forces beyond reason's control. The anxiety this generates proves so overwhelming that we systematically avoid self-knowledge through perpetual motion. Pascal's analysis of diversion connects to his broader philosophical project by exposing the inadequacy of purely human solutions to the human condition. Diversion fails because it addresses symptoms rather than causes, providing temporary relief whilst allowing underlying problems to intensify. Diversion amuses us, Pascal noted with characteristic precision, and leads us unconsciously to death. This systematic avoidance reveals why even the highest human wisdom proves inadequate. Philosophical approaches that rely purely on reason cannot address the fundamental structure of human longing that drives us toward diversion. The very act of philosophical reflection can itself become a sophisticated form of diversion, keeping us busy with abstract questions whilst avoiding the personal confrontation with our condition that true self-knowledge requires. Pascal's critique of traditional philosophical approaches to human happiness emerges not from ignorance but from intimate familiarity. Educated in classical philosophy and deeply engaged with contemporary thinkers like Descartes, Montaigne, and the Stoics, Pascal possessed the credentials to recognize what others missed. The philosophers, he observed, have not prescribed emotions suitable to the two states, the dual condition of human misery and greatness that he had identified through his analysis of the two infinites. Their sophisticated systems, however elegant, address symptoms rather than the fundamental structure of human longing itself. The problem runs deeper than philosophical inadequacy. Even the most rigorous thinking cannot resolve the basic tension between human aspiration and human limitation. Pascal had experienced this firsthand through his own extraordinary intellectual achievements in mathematics, physics, and probability theory. Yet these very accomplishments revealed their own boundaries. Human wisdom, however sophisticated, cannot address the fundamental questions about ultimate meaning, purpose, and destiny that drive the restlessness he had diagnosed as central to human nature. Consider Pascal's specific engagement with Stoicism, a philosophy he acknowledged for its noble aspirations, yet found ultimately impossible. The Stoics demanded suppression of natural human desires and emotions, treating as psychological weakness what Pascal recognized as essential features of human structure. They conclude that what has been done once can be done always, Pascal noted. This reveals the Stoic error, mistaking exceptional moments of virtue for sustainable human possibility. Stoic attempts to achieve self-sufficiency through reason and virtue ignore the fundamental dependence and restlessness that Pascal identified as structural, not accidental, features of existence. The Stoic sage, perfectly rational and emotionally detached, represents not human fulfillment, but human denial. Such philosophy asks people to become less than human in order to achieve happiness, suppressing the very longings and vulnerabilities that connect them to the infinite dimensions of reality Pascal had explored. Epicureanism fails more obviously because finite pleasures cannot satisfy infinite restlessness. Pascal's analysis reveals how even refined pleasures become boring or disappointing, and how the pursuit of pleasure often produces its opposite. Epicurean attempts to find happiness through managing desires and maximizing pleasure ignore the deeper question: why are humans structured to desire more than finite existence can provide? The present is never our end, Pascal observed. The past and present are our means. The future alone is our end. This temporal structure of human desire defeats any philosophy based on present satisfaction. The critique extends beyond specific philosophical schools to encompass the entire project of purely human wisdom. Even the highest achievements, scientific knowledge, artistic creation, moral virtue, while genuinely valuable, leave the deepest questions unanswered. Pascal's own mathematical discoveries and scientific innovations gave him unique authority to recognize their limitations. They illuminate aspects of reality without addressing why reality exists or what human existence ultimately means. This inadequacy points toward something crucial in Pascal's analysis. The failure of philosophy reveals not human intellectual weakness, but the mismatch between human nature and purely finite solutions. The restlessness, the longing, the sense of incompleteness that philosophy attempts to cure may not be problems to be solved, but indications of human orientation toward transcendent reality. The inadequacy of worldly wisdom thus becomes evidence for the need for resources beyond human capacity, divine assistance in addressing the human condition that philosophy can diagnose but cannot heal. Part 5. The greatness of human nature. Human beings possess a remarkable and mysterious capacity that sets them apart from all other creatures we observe. Despite our profound limitations and tendency toward self-deception, we can distinguish truth from falsehood, justice from injustice, beauty from ugliness. Pascal recognized this extraordinary ability as fundamental evidence of human greatness, declaring that man is neither angel nor beast, and the misfortune is that he who would act the angel acts the beast. This capacity manifests not merely in abstract intellectual recognition, but in the universal human experience of feeling genuinely bound by standards we neither created nor can dismiss through personal preference. Consider how this capacity operates in daily experience. When someone lies to us, we feel wronged not simply because the lie inconveniences us, but because truth itself has been violated. When we witness injustice, we experience genuine moral outrage that transcends personal interest. These responses suggest access to objective standards that judge our natural inclinations. Pascal observed that even when people disagree about specific moral questions, they share the assumption that some things are genuinely right or wrong, not merely matters of taste or cultural convention. This shared assumption reveals something profound about human nature itself. The capacity for moral recognition distinguishes humans from beings governed purely by instinct or conditioning. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than animals follow their nature without moral conflict. But humans experience what Pascal called internal war between reason and the passions. This moral conflict itself demonstrates human greatness. We experience genuine obligation even when it conflicts with immediate desire, suggesting participation in transcendent standards that evaluate our natural inclinations. The very possibility of moral struggle indicates that humans are oriented toward goods that exceed biological necessity. Most remarkably, humans recognize moral and intellectual ideals even when failing to achieve them. Our failures involve betrayal of known goods rather than mere ignorance. People feel genuine guilt for moral failures and genuine satisfaction for moral achievements, indicating that moral standards are not arbitrary impositions, but recognized features of reality. Pascal noted that we know truth not only by the reason, but also by the heart. This universal orientation toward objective goods that transcend individual preference points to something transcendent in human nature itself. This capacity becomes even more mysterious when examined closely. How do material beings produced by blind natural processes develop genuine concern for truth, justice, and beauty? If humans are merely sophisticated animals, why do we alone experience moral obligation as binding, regardless of personal advantage? Pascal argued that human capacity for recognizing objective moral standards suggests divine creation and orientation. Our moral nature makes sense only if we are beings designed for relationship with transcendent good. The heart, Pascal insisted, has its reasons which reason does not know. Human capacity for love and self-transcendence provides even stronger evidence for human greatness and divine orientation. We can sacrifice immediate pleasure for distant good, personal advantage for others' welfare, even life itself for principles we hold sacred. This capacity for self-transcendence suggests that human nature finds its proper explanation only within a theological framework that accounts for both our remarkable capacities and our profound limitations. Pascal recognized that humans possess a remarkable capacity for genuine love that transcends immediate self-interest, revealing a form of greatness that fundamentally distinguishes us from creatures governed purely by instinct or survival. This capacity manifests in countless observable ways. Parents sacrifice comfort, sleep, and resources for their children's well-being. Friends invest emotional energy in relationships that demand more than they return. Citizens risk their lives for their country's welfare. Some individuals even extend compassion to strangers or enemies who offer nothing in return. Pascal observed that attempting to reduce all such behavior to disguised self-interest requires ignoring obvious cases where love clearly costs the lover more than any conceivable benefit they might receive. The reality of self-transcendent love becomes particularly evident in parental relationships, where Pascal witnessed people willingly sacrifice immediate pleasure, personal comfort, and even life itself for their children's good. This sacrifice extends beyond biological programming to conscious choice, as parents regularly choose their children's long-term welfare over their own immediate desires. Similarly, genuine friendship involves authentic concern for another's well-being that exceeds what the relationship provides in return. Pascal's own friendships, particularly with the Duke of Roanès and his beloved sister Jacqueline, shaped his understanding of love's transformative power and undeniable reality. Through these relationships, he recognized that the heart has its order, the mind has its own, acknowledging that love operates according to principles that reason alone cannot fully comprehend or control. These experiences of genuine love provide glimpses of fulfillment that point beyond finite existence whilst remaining grounded in observable human experience. Pascal noticed that moments of authentic love, whether directed toward persons, truth, beauty, or moral good, produce a qualitatively different satisfaction than pleasure or achievement. Such experiences suggest that humans are fundamentally designed for relationship and self-giving rather than mere self-preservation or pleasure-seeking. As Pascal observed, we are born to work together, recognizing that isolation contradicts our essential nature. Love creates meaning that survives disappointment and loss in ways that pleasure and achievement cannot, pointing towards something in human nature that transcends material existence. Pascal's analysis of love connects directly to his broader understanding of human nature and divine orientation. The capacity for self-transcendent love suggests that humans are designed for relationship with infinite goodness, since finite goods cannot fully satisfy our expansive capacity for love. There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man, Pascal noted, recognizing that our ability to love beyond ourselves points toward our ultimate destination. This observation becomes crucial for understanding Pascal's complete vision, the coexistence of genuine human greatness demonstrated through love and moral capacity, with genuine human misery, demonstrated through restlessness and moral failure, creates a fundamental paradox. The same beings capable of heroic self-sacrifice are also capable of petty cruelty and profound selfishness. This duality cannot be resolved through purely natural explanations, but demands theological understanding to account for both the heights and depths of human experience. Pascal understood that recognizing love's reality provides essential evidence for human greatness, whilst simultaneously highlighting our need for divine relationship to fulfill our transcendent capacities completely. Pascal's most profound insight into human nature begins with a recognition that most philosophers desperately try to avoid. We are simultaneously capable of genuine greatness and prone to profound misery, and both aspects are equally real. This isn't a problem to be solved by choosing one side over the other. It's the fundamental truth about human experience that any adequate philosophy must explain. Pascal captures this paradox in one of his most striking passages. What a chimera, then, is man! What a novelty! What a monster! What a chaos! What a contradiction! What a prodigy! Judge of all things, imbecile worm of the earth, depositary of truth. This isn't rhetorical flourish. Pascal means precisely what he says. Humans genuinely are judges of all things, capable of discovering mathematical truths that govern the universe, capable of moral insight that transcends self-interest, capable of love that sacrifices for others. Yet humans are also imbecile worms, prone to self-deception, driven by vanity, unable to face their own mortality without distraction, incapable of achieving the very goods they recognize as worthwhile. The same being who can calculate the movement of planets cannot reliably choose their own happiness. Most philosophical systems fail precisely because they cannot account for both sides of this paradox simultaneously. The Stoics, for all their noble aspirations, construct their philosophy around human rational capacity and moral dignity, whilst systematically underestimating genuine human limitation and dependence. They tell us we can achieve tranquility through reason alone, that we can become indifferent to external goods, that we can live according to nature. Yet, experience reveals that even the most dedicated Stoic cannot consistently achieve the detachment they prescribe. The very need for constant philosophical exercise and self-correction reveals the gap between Stoic ideals and human reality. Skepticism and materialism make the opposite error. They recognize human limitations so thoroughly that they cannot account for the genuine moral and intellectual capacities that make humans different from other animals. If we are merely complex arrangements of matter, why do we suffer from the very limitations that other animals accept without distress? Why do we have concepts of justice, truth, and beauty that transcend immediate survival needs? The skeptic, who argues that nothing can be known with certainty, still acts as though their skeptical arguments deserve serious consideration. Pascal sees this pattern throughout the history of philosophy. Descartes overestimates human rational capacity, believing that clear and distinct ideas can provide certain knowledge about the fundamental structure of reality, whilst ignoring the heart's knowledge and the limits of geometric reasoning. Montaigne recognizes human limitation with remarkable insight, cataloging the ways that custom, circumstance, and self-interest shape our beliefs, yet fails to acknowledge the genuine human capacity for moral greatness and intellectual achievement that makes his own analysis possible. This is why Pascal adopts his distinctive dialectical approach. If he exalt himself, one humble him. If he humble himself, one exalt him. This isn't mere rhetorical strategy. Pascal recognizes that human nature cannot be captured by emphasizing either greatness or misery alone. Any philosophy that celebrates human dignity without acknowledging genuine human limitation becomes proud and unrealistic. Any philosophy that emphasizes human limitation without acknowledging genuine human capacity becomes cynical and reductive. The coexistence of greatness and misery in human experience suggests something crucial. Humans are not in their natural or intended state. Pascal argues that this paradox makes sense if humans were created for greatness, but have fallen from their intended condition. Part 6. The limits of reason in ultimate questions. Pascal stands as one of history's most accomplished rational thinkers. A mathematician whose work with probability theory revolutionized decision-making under uncertainty, a physicist whose experimental investigations of atmospheric pressure advanced our understanding of the natural world, and a logician whose geometric method provided models of rigorous demonstration. His philosophy emerges not from hostility toward reason, but from intimate knowledge of its genuine power and proper scope. Reason's last step, Pascal observes, is the recognition that there are an infinite number of things which are beyond it. This insight comes from someone who pushed reason to its limits and discovered both its remarkable capacities and its natural boundaries. Pascal's mathematical achievements demonstrate reason operating at peak efficiency within its appropriate domain. His work with infinite series revealed how mathematical analysis could grasp relationships that initially appear paradoxical, showing how the sum of infinitely many terms could equal a finite value. His development of probability theory provided rational methods for making decisions when outcomes remain uncertain, establishing mathematical foundations for calculating expected values and weighing competing possibilities. These accomplishments reveal reason's capacity to discover genuine truths about quantifiable relationships, logical structures, and predictable patterns in the natural world. His experimental methodology exemplifies reason's proper function in establishing reliable knowledge through careful observation and logical analysis. Pascal's famous barometric experiments on Puy de Dôme used controlled conditions to test competing hypotheses about atmospheric pressure and the possibility of vacuum. By measuring mercury levels at different altitudes whilst controlling for other variables, he demonstrated how empirical reason could resolve theoretical disputes through systematic investigation. This work shows reason functioning precisely as it should, forming hypotheses, designing tests, gathering evidence, and drawing conclusions based on observable results. Pascal recognized that reason excels at refuting errors and establishing positive knowledge within its natural domain. His Provincial Letters demonstrate how rational analysis could expose logical contradictions and factual errors in religious arguments, showing that genuine faith requires intellectual honesty rather than abandoning critical thinking. Contradiction is not a sign of falsity, Pascal notes. This observation reveals how careful reasoning distinguishes reliable knowledge from mere opinion by examining the logical structure of arguments and their correspondence with observable evidence. The crucial insight emerges when Pascal examines what happens when reason attempts to address questions that exceed its natural capacity. Ultimate questions about existence, meaning, purpose, and God concern realities beyond the physical world that empirical investigation can examine. Pascal's critique targets not reason itself, but reason's overextension beyond its proper scope. We must know where to doubt, where to feel certain, where to submit, he explains, recognizing that wisdom includes understanding the appropriate limits of different methods of inquiry. This recognition prepares his argument that ultimate questions require approaches suited to their distinctive character, complementing rather than contradicting reason's legitimate achievements within its own domain. Pascal's most revolutionary insight emerges from his recognition that the questions which matter most deeply to human existence cannot be resolved through the methods that work so brilliantly in mathematics and natural philosophy. When we ask whether God exists, what constitutes the meaning of life, or what ultimate moral obligations bind us, we confront realities that transcend the physical world, which reason investigates with such precision. As Pascal puts it with characteristic clarity, if there is a God, he is infinitely incomprehensible, since, having neither parts nor limits, he has no affinity to us. This incomprehensibility is not a temporary limitation awaiting future intellectual progress, but reflects the fundamental nature of ultimate questions themselves. Pascal's mathematical training gave him unique insight into why applying geometric demonstration to transcendent realities involves what we might call a category mistake. We cannot weigh beauty, measure justice, or calculate love because these realities operate in different dimensions, from physical quantities. Similarly, attempting to prove God's existence through syllogistic reasoning or empirical investigation misconceives both the nature of proof and the nature of what we seek to prove. Traditional scholastic arguments for God's existence fail not through logical error, but through category confusion. The ontological argument, which attempts to deduce God's existence from the concept of perfect being, proves at most a philosophical abstraction rather than the living God who calls and transforms human hearts. The cosmological argument, which reasons from effects to first cause, assumes precisely what needs demonstration, that the chain of causation requires a supernatural terminus rather than extending infinitely or forming a closed system. Pascal draws a sharp distinction between the God of philosophers and scholars, produced by such proofs, and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, encountered in religious experience. Yet attempts to disprove God's existence through reason face identical logical problems. Atheistic arguments typically assume materialistic premises about the nature of reality, which cannot themselves be rationally demonstrated. When someone argues that only physical entities exist, or that all genuine knowledge must be empirically verifiable, they advance metaphysical claims that transcend empirical investigation. Pascal observes that atheism shows strength of mind, but only to a certain degree, because it requires intellectual courage to reject comfortable religious beliefs, but ultimately rests on unprovable assumptions about reality's fundamental character. Both theistic and atheistic rational arguments thus depend upon premises that cannot be established through the very methods they claim to employ. Pure reason proves insufficient for settling ultimate questions in either direction, because these questions concern realities that lie beyond reason's proper domain. This recognition leads not to intellectual defeat but to philosophical wisdom. As Pascal notes, the heart has its reasons, which reason does not know. Acknowledging reason's limits regarding ultimate questions is itself a supremely rational conclusion. It represents the intellectual humility that recognizes different types of questions require different approaches to knowledge. Mathematical truths demand geometric demonstration. Empirical claims require experimental verification. But questions about transcendent reality and ultimate meaning operate in different epistemological territory entirely. This recognition opens space for other forms of knowledge and commitment without abandoning rational thought within its appropriate sphere. Pascal presents us with a profound paradox. It is rational to recognize that reason cannot answer all important questions. This insight strikes at the heart of rationalist confidence, yet Pascal argues it represents the highest achievement of rational thought itself. The ultimate end of reason is to recognize that there are an infinite number of things which surpass it. It is but feeble if it does not see so far as to know this. Here Pascal reveals intellectual humility not as reason's defeat, but as its culmination, the point where genuine rationality acknowledges its own boundaries rather than claiming certainty where none is possible. This position emerges directly from Pascal's mathematical work, where he learned to distinguish rigorously between what can be proven and what must be assumed as foundational principles. In geometry, we accept axioms not because we can demonstrate them, but because they provide the necessary foundation for demonstration itself. Similarly, Pascal argues, a truly reasonable person will acknowledge the boundaries of rational demonstration rather than extending claims beyond what evidence can support. The mathematician who understands proof most deeply also understands most clearly where proof ends and assumption begins. This acknowledgement does not lead to skepticism, but to intellectual humility and appropriate confidence within reason's proper domain. Pascal distinguishes sharply between recognizing limits and abandoning the pursuit of knowledge altogether. Is less than #0, 5 is greater than. His scientific work exemplifies this approach, acknowledging that we cannot achieve complete knowledge of atmospheric pressure does not prevent us from making reliable measurements and useful predictions within appropriate margins of error. We must know where to doubt, where to feel certain, where to submit, Pascal observes, showing how wisdom involves calibrating our confidence to the strength of our evidence rather than claiming uniform certainty across all domains. Intellectual humility about ultimate questions opens space for other forms of knowledge and relationship that pure rationalism would exclude. Pascal argues that if transcendent realities exist and seek relationship with humans, they would naturally address the whole person rather than just the calculating intellect. His distinction between knowing God through philosophical argument versus knowing God through personal encounter becomes crucial here. Faith is different from proof. The one is human. The other is a gift of God. This prepares his argument that religious commitment can be reasonable even when not rationally demonstrable, because reasonableness itself requires acknowledging what lies beyond demonstration. Pascal's position enables both rigorous intellectual work within reason's proper sphere and openness to transcendent reality beyond that sphere. Reason would never submit if it did not judge that there are some occasions on which it ought to submit. This creates space for the heart to provide legitimate knowledge that complements rather than contradicts reason, enabling access to realities that pure rationalism cannot reach whilst maintaining intellectual integrity within reason's appropriate domain. Part 7. The Heart and its Reasons. Pascal revolutionized our understanding of knowledge itself by recognizing the heart as a legitimate organ of cognition, not merely the seat of emotion or romantic sentiment. His famous declaration that the heart has its reasons, which reason does not know, represents far more than poetic metaphor. It constitutes a profound epistemological insight that challenges the supremacy of purely rational demonstration. Pascal's cœur designates a form of intuitive knowledge that grasps first principles and fundamental truths through immediate recognition rather than logical proof. This concept emerged directly from his mathematical investigations, where he discovered that even geometric reasoning must begin with axioms and definitions that cannot themselves be proven geometrically, but must be apprehended as self-evidently true. The heart knows basic logical and mathematical principles that reason then employs, but cannot itself establish. Pascal observed that we know immediately that contradictory statements cannot both be true, that the whole exceeds its parts, and that space possesses 3 dimensions, not through syllogistic demonstration, but through direct intellectual apprehension. He noted that principles are felt. This makes the heart not reason's opponent, but its indispensable foundation, providing the starting points that make rational demonstration possible in the first place. Without the heart's immediate grasp of logical principles, reasoning would face infinite regress, forever seeking proofs for its own premises. In human relationships, moral judgment, and aesthetic appreciation, the heart provides immediate knowledge that reasoning then elaborates and applies. We recognize a friend's trustworthiness, appreciate beauty in art or nature, or sense moral obligation through direct apprehension rather than deductive argument. Pascal observed that the heart has its order, the mind has its own, acknowledging these as distinct but equally valid cognitive processes. His own relationships exemplify this principle. His friendship with the Duke of Roanès and his spiritual guidance of his sister Jacqueline demonstrated how personal knowledge operates through intuitive recognition of character, sincerity, and moral depth that no amount of logical analysis could adequately capture or replace. Pascal's analysis of the heart connects to his broader epistemological framework by revealing access to realities that pure rationalism cannot reach. The heart's knowledge proves remarkably consistent across cultures and individuals, suggesting it constitutes genuine knowledge of objective features of reality rather than mere subjective preference. As he declared, "We know truth, not only by the reason, but also by the heart." This capacity for recognizing value and meaning becomes crucial for understanding Pascal's arguments about religious knowledge and the possibility of relationship with transcendent reality that exists beyond the reach of geometric demonstration yet remains accessible to human understanding. Pascal discovered something remarkable about human consciousness. We possess a form of knowledge that operates entirely outside the realm of logical demonstration, yet proves absolutely essential for navigating reality. The heart, in Pascal's precise terminology, grasps the reality and importance of values like love, beauty, justice, and meaning through immediate recognition rather than syllogistic proof. We don't demonstrate that love is valuable through geometric reasoning, nor do we prove that justice matters through empirical measurement. Yet our recognition of these realities shapes our most fundamental life decisions with a certainty that often exceeds our confidence in mathematical theorems. The heart has its order, the mind has its own, which uses principles and demonstrations, Pascal observed, identifying two distinct but equally legitimate modes of knowing. When we encounter genuine beauty, we don't construct logical arguments for its significance before allowing ourselves to be moved. When we witness injustice, we don't require philosophical proofs before recognizing its wrongness. The heart perceives these realities directly, with an immediacy that bypasses demonstration whilst achieving genuine knowledge. Attempts to reduce all value judgments to logical calculation or empirical measurement actually impoverish our understanding of realities that are genuinely objective but not quantifiable. This insight reveals something profound about the structure of human knowledge itself. Pascal noticed that despite disagreements about specific applications, people universally recognize the reality of moral obligation, the importance of love, and the power of beauty. These recognitions prove remarkably reliable across cultures and individuals, suggesting they constitute genuine knowledge of objective realities rather than mere subjective preferences. The very existence of moral conflict demonstrates this objectivity. There is internal war in man between reason and the passions, Pascal noted, showing how our struggles with conscience reveal access to standards that judge our immediate desires. This universal orientation toward transcendent values suggests something objective in moral and aesthetic experience that transcends cultural conditioning or personal psychology. When abstract reasoning conflicts with the heart's knowledge in concrete human situations, the heart often proves the more trustworthy guide. Pascal observed that purely logical approaches to human relationships, moral decisions, and life choices frequently miss essential realities that the heart grasps immediately. His famous insight that the heart has reasons which reason does not know captures this precisely. Pascal's own experience provided compelling evidence for this principle. His decision to abandon purely secular intellectual pursuits after his mystical experience demonstrated how the heart's knowledge can provide guidance that transcends what calculation alone would suggest. The heart recognized realities about meaning, purpose, and divine relationship that his brilliant mathematical mind, operating independently, had failed to perceive. This analysis connects directly to Pascal's broader understanding of human nature and divine orientation. The heart's reasons are genuine reasons operating through different but equally valid cognitive processes, making it not reason's opponent but its necessary complement in understanding reality. Faith is different from proof. The one is human, the other is a gift of God, Pascal observed, distinguishing between different types of certainty without diminishing either. The heart's capacity for love and self-transcendence suggests it is designed for relationship with infinite goodness, preparing Pascal's argument that religious experience involves genuine knowledge accessed through the heart rather than mere wishful thinking or emotional manipulation. Pascal discovered that if God exists and seeks relationship with humans, the heart would be the natural organ for receiving such communication. Divine reality, being fundamentally personal rather than merely abstract, would address the whole human being rather than just the rational faculty. This insight emerged from Pascal's own transformative religious experience on November 23, 1654, when he encountered what he called the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not of the philosophers, and of the learned. His mystical experience demonstrated the heart's capacity for direct apprehension of divine reality in ways that purely intellectual approaches could never achieve. The heart's capacity for love and self-transcendence suggests it is designed for relationship with infinite goodness rather than merely finite goods. Pascal observed that human love always reaches beyond what finite relationships can fully satisfy, revealing an orientation toward transcendent reality. He recognized that there is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man, which cannot be filled by any created thing. The heart's restless longing for perfect love, complete truth, and absolute justice points toward realities that finite existence cannot provide, but that divine relationship might fulfill. Religious experience through the heart provides knowledge that is both subjective and objective, felt by the individual, but confirmed through observable transformation in character and perspective. Pascal's own religious conversion produced dramatic changes in his priorities, relationships, and understanding that were evident to others, suggesting genuine encounter with objective reality rather than mere psychological projection. As he noted, "The knowledge of God is very far from the love of Him. Heart knowledge of God involves transformation of the whole person, not just intellectual assent to propositions." This analysis of the heart's divine orientation connects directly to Pascal's broader philosophical project, preparing his arguments about religious commitment and the wager. If the heart is designed for relationship with infinite reality, then religious seeking becomes not just permissible, but necessary for human fulfillment. The heart has its reasons which reason does not know, Pascal observed, pointing toward a form of knowledge that complements rather than contradicts rational inquiry. His famous wager would apply mathematical thinking to the practical question of religious commitment, showing how reason itself suggests that cultivating the heart's openness to divine reality represents the most rational approach to ultimate questions that reason cannot definitively resolve. Part Opt. Pascal's wager. Pascal begins his famous wager with a stark acknowledgement that cuts through centuries of theological argumentation. Let us then examine this point and say, God is, or he is not. But to which side shall we incline? Reason can decide nothing here. This declaration emerges directly from his analysis of human reason's fundamental limitations when confronting ultimate questions. Having demonstrated through his work on the two infinites that we exist suspended between mathematical infinities we cannot comprehend, Pascal recognizes that the divine reality transcends our rational faculties entirely. The uncertainty about God's existence is not a temporary problem awaiting better philosophical arguments or scientific discoveries. It represents a permanent feature of the human condition, rooted in our finite position between nothingness and everything. This uncertainty creates what Pascal identifies as the central existential predicament of human life. We cannot remain neutral on the question of God's existence because neutrality itself constitutes a practical stance with profound implications for how we live. Pascal insists that you must wager. It is not optional. Every decision about how to spend our limited time, what values deserve our devotion, how we should treat other human beings, and what ultimate hopes we dare to maintain involves implicit assumptions about whether transcendent reality and divine judgment are real. When we choose pleasure over virtue, temporal success over spiritual development, or despair over hope, we are living as if God does not exist. When we choose sacrifice for others, pursue truth despite personal cost, or maintain hope despite suffering, we are living as if God does exist. Pascal's crucial insight is that we are embarked, whether we choose consciously or not. The ship of life carries us forward through decisions that cannot wait for philosophical certainty. Religious commitment becomes a practical decision that cannot be avoided through theoretical agnosticism. This recognition transforms the question of God's existence from an abstract theological problem into an urgent practical dilemma requiring immediate resolution. We must decide how to live before we can prove what ultimate reality contains. This existential situation parallels other crucial life decisions that must be made under conditions of uncertainty. Pascal draws on his groundbreaking mathematical work with Fermat on probability theory, which demonstrated how rational agents can make optimal decisions even when outcomes remain uncertain. His pioneering insights into mathematical probability taught him that uncertainty does not eliminate rationality but transforms it. As he observes, uncertainty of gain ought not to deter us from certainty of adventure when we are playing for infinite stakes. Pascal's wager represents his attempt to apply reason's own tools to demonstrate that religious commitment can be rational even when religious truth cannot be rationally proven. This approach embodies his broader philosophical method of using mathematical insights to illuminate existential questions that pure mathematics cannot resolve. The logic of infinite stakes transforms the entire calculation, making belief the rational choice even if God's existence appears highly uncertain. Reason itself, when properly applied to the structure of this decision, points toward cultivating faith rather than remaining in skeptical neutrality. Pascal approaches religious belief with the precision of a mathematician analyzing a decision problem. Every human being faces a fundamental choice regarding religious commitment, and Pascal transforms this existential question into a rigorous calculation of expected outcomes. He presents the decision matrix with stark clarity. If you gain all. If you lose nothing. Wager, then, without hesitation that he is. The mathematical structure reveals 4 possible outcomes. If God exists and we believe, we gain infinite happiness. If God exists and we don't believe, we lose infinite happiness. If God doesn't exist, the difference between belief and unbelief involves only finite goods and losses. Pascal draws directly on his pioneering work with probability theory and expected value calculations, where rational choice requires multiplying the value of each outcome by its probability. The presence of infinite stakes transforms this calculation in decisive ways. Pascal demonstrates that even if God's existence appears highly improbable, the infinite value of the potential gain makes belief the mathematically rational choice. He states this principle with mathematical precision. There is here an infinity of an infinitely happy life to gain, a chance of gain against a finite number of chances of loss, and what you stake is finite. This reasoning applies his sophisticated understanding of infinite series and limits to practical decision-making. In mathematical terms, when infinite values enter a calculation, they dominate all finite considerations, regardless of probability assignments. Even if we assign God's existence a probability of 1 in a million, the expected value of belief remains infinitely greater than the expected value of unbelief. Pascal anticipates the obvious objection that we might choose the wrong God and face punishment for believing in false divinities. His argument addresses this concern by focusing on the general question of whether transcendent reality exists and whether our ultimate destiny depends on our relationship to it. The wager's logic applies to any conception of divine reality that involves ultimate consequences for human choices and eternal significance for human existence. Pascal references the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but the mathematical structure applies to any genuine transcendent reality that makes ultimate claims on human existence. The argument concerns whether reality includes a dimension that transcends finite human experience and demands recognition. This mathematical approach to religious commitment reveals Pascal's broader understanding of rational decision-making and human nature. The wager demonstrates that religious commitment can be reasonable even when not rationally demonstrable, directly challenging the assumption that faith and reason necessarily oppose each other. Pascal observes that reason would never submit if it did not judge that there are some occasions on which it ought to submit. Reason itself recognizes its own limitations and the necessity of making decisions under uncertainty. The wager shows how rational analysis can lead us to the threshold of faith without crossing it through purely logical demonstration. This creates space for authentic religious commitment that neither contradicts reason nor depends entirely upon it, preparing Pascal's response to those who object that we cannot simply choose to believe through an act of will. The most persistent objection to Pascal's wager strikes at its psychological foundation. We cannot simply choose to believe through an act of will, since genuine belief requires conviction rather than calculation. Critics argue that faith produced by prudential reasoning remains hollow, a mere performance lacking authentic commitment. Pascal acknowledges this challenge directly. You would like to attain faith and do not know the way. You would like to cure yourself of unbelief and ask the remedy for it. Learn of those who have been bound like you and who now stake all their possessions. The wager cannot produce immediate genuine faith, but Pascal argues we can choose to act in ways that cultivate belief over time. His practical advice reveals sophisticated understanding of how conviction develops. We must participate in religious practices, associate with believers. The wager initiates a process rather than completing it. Pascal recognizes that acting as if something is true often leads to genuine conviction through experience and habit formation. Custom is our nature, he observes, and our deepest beliefs emerge through lived practice rather than abstract reasoning alone. This insight reflects Pascal's understanding of human psychology as involving both rational and non-rational elements working together. The external must be joined to the internal to obtain anything from God, he argues. That is to say, We must kneel, pray with the lips, etc., in order that proud man, who would not submit to God, may be now subject to the creature. Religious transformation requires engagement of our entire being, not merely intellectual assent. Pascal recognizes that authentic religious commitment transcends calculated self-interest, requiring transformation of the heart and genuine love for divine reality. The knowledge of God is very far from the love of Him, he notes. The wager serves as a first step toward authentic religious experience, rather than a substitute for it. Pascal's own religious encounter went far beyond prudential calculation to involve genuine divine love and complete reorientation of his life. This refined understanding demonstrates how the wager integrates reason, practice, and grace in religious commitment. The argument uses reason to point beyond reason toward realities, knowable only through heart knowledge and divine gift. Faith is different from proof. The one is human, the other is a gift of God. Reason provides the initial opening, but authentic faith requires divine initiative meeting human receptivity. The heart has its reasons, which reason does not know. Pascal's wager exemplifies this integration by showing how rational argument can prepare the ground for non-rational knowledge whilst respecting the limits of demonstration. Religious truth requires this complex coordination of rational, practical, and spiritual elements because of God's chosen hiddenness. Divine reality provides sufficient evidence for sincere seekers whilst remaining concealed from those who prefer not to find. Part 9. The Hidden God and Religious Knowledge. Pascal's theology of divine hiddenness emerges as perhaps his most sophisticated contribution to religious thought, solving a puzzle that had tormented believers and skeptics alike. Why does an all-powerful God remain concealed from human understanding? Rather than viewing divine hiddenness as evidence against God's existence, Pascal argues it reveals the very nature of divine love itself. As he observes with characteristic precision, God willed to redeem men and to open salvation to those who seek it. But men render themselves so unworthy of it that it is right that God should refuse to some because of their obduracy. This hiddenness is not divine failure or cosmic accident, but a deliberate choice that serves the deepest purposes of authentic relationship between the human and the divine. The genius of Pascal's argument lies in recognizing that complete divine revelation would paradoxically destroy the very relationship it sought to establish. If God's existence were as obvious and undeniable as mathematical truths, human beings would have no choice but to acknowledge divine reality. Such overwhelming evidence would reduce religious commitment to mere compelled acknowledgement, eliminating the possibility of genuine relationship based on love rather than fear or calculated self-interest. Pascal understood that forced submission cannot generate the authentic appreciation and freely chosen devotion that characterizes genuine religious relationship. The divine remains hidden precisely to preserve human freedom, creating space for authentic response rather than coerced recognition. Yet complete hiddenness would prove equally destructive to religious possibility, providing no basis whatsoever for religious commitment or hope. Pascal identifies the profound wisdom in the current arrangement. There is enough light for those who only desire to see, and enough obscurity for those who have a contrary disposition. This careful balance allows for authentic choice whilst providing genuine guidance for sincere seekers. The evidence exists, but it requires active seeking, openness of heart, and willingness to move beyond purely rational calculation. Divine hiddenness thus creates optimal conditions for genuine religious relationship by demanding the integration of reason, intuitive knowledge, and practical commitment. Pascal's framework explains why religious knowledge operates differently from scientific demonstration whilst remaining genuinely evidential. As he notes with striking insight, if there were no obscurity, man would not be sensible of his corruption. If there were no light, man would not hope for a remedy. The partial hiddenness of God serves human development by requiring seekers to acknowledge their limitations and need, whilst providing sufficient hope to sustain the search for truth. This theology connects directly to Pascal's understanding of human nature as caught between greatness and misery, requiring both humility about human capacities and confidence in divine assistance. The hiddenness serves love by creating space for free response rather than forced submission, allowing religious commitment to express genuine appreciation for divine goodness rather than mere prudential calculation. Pascal recognizes that the heart has its reasons which reason does not know, pointing toward forms of evidence that operate through transformed affections and practical engagement rather than purely intellectual demonstration. Divine hiddenness thus becomes not an obstacle to religious knowledge, but its necessary condition, ensuring that those who find God do so through authentic seeking rather than overwhelming compulsion, whilst those who prefer not to find remain free in their choice. Although God remains hidden from direct observation, Pascal identifies various signs that point toward divine reality for those who approach them with sincere seeking rather than skeptical dismissal. These signs emerge first in the natural world itself, where the order and beauty of creation suggests intelligent design rather than random chance. Pascal's famous observation that the eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me reveals how even the cosmos's apparent indifference can point toward transcendent reality for those who contemplate it deeply. The very vastness that overwhelms human comprehension suggests dimensions of reality beyond material causation. Pascal's scientific work reinforced this intuition through his discovery of mathematical order throughout nature. From geometric relationships governing planetary motion to probability patterns emerging in games of chance, the underlying mathematical structure of reality suggested intelligence that transcends material processes. The same mind that could formulate precise laws governing falling bodies and atmospheric pressure recognized that such elegant mathematical relationships pointed beyond themselves toward their source. This wasn't naive design arguments, but recognition that mathematical intelligibility itself requires explanation. More compelling evidence emerges in the moral structure of human experience itself. Our sense of obligation, guilt, and longing for perfect justice cannot be satisfied by finite existence. Yet these orientations persist universally across cultures and individuals. Pascal argues that this universal human orientation toward transcendent moral standards suggests their objective reality and divine source. There is internal war in man between reason and the passions, he observes, showing how moral conflict itself points toward standards that transcend natural inclination. We judge ourselves by criteria that evolution alone cannot explain. Human restlessness provides particularly striking evidence. Our infinite longing and perpetual dissatisfaction with finite goods suggests we are designed for relationship with infinite reality. Rather than evidence against transcendent purpose, our inability to find lasting satisfaction in worldly achievements points toward our true destination. Pascal sees this restlessness as homesickness for our proper home, making our very misery evidence of our greatness. Even more powerful evidence emerges in historical testimony of religious transformation. Individuals and communities report encounters with transcendent reality that fundamentally change their lives in observable ways. Pascal witnessed such transformations directly, including his sister Jacqueline's religious conversion and the spiritual renewal at Port Royal. These weren't mere psychological adjustments, but complete reorientations of personality and purpose that produced lasting moral and spiritual fruit. Pascal's own transformative experience on his night of fire provided the most convincing evidence of all. This wasn't philosophical speculation, but personal encounter that generated knowledge both subjective and objective, felt by the individual, but confirmed through observable changes in character and perspective. The knowledge of God is very far from the love of Him, Pascal notes, showing how genuine religious experience produces not just intellectual assent, but moral and spiritual transformation that provides its own evidence of divine reality. This creates a distinctive form of knowledge that involves relationship rather than mere information. Religious commitment transforms the believer's perspective, making previously hidden aspects of reality visible through what Pascal calls the eyes of faith. Faith is different from proof, he observes. The one is human, the other is a gift of God. This doesn't make religious knowledge arbitrary, but shows how it complements scientific knowledge in providing access to ultimate reality through transformed relationship rather than detached observation. Religious knowledge operates through entirely different mechanisms than scientific knowledge, yet Pascal insists it remains genuine knowledge nonetheless. We know truth, not only by the reason, but also by the heart. And it is in this last way that we know first principles, he declares, establishing that the heart possesses its own cognitive capacity for immediate apprehension of reality. This heart knowledge proves indispensable for understanding personal relationships, moral obligations, and ultimate questions about meaning and purpose that scientific analysis cannot penetrate. Just as we know our closest friends through lived relationship rather than through laboratory study, religious knowledge emerges through personal encounter with divine reality that transforms understanding from within. This transformation reveals aspects of reality previously hidden from purely secular perspectives. Pascal observed through his own experience how religious commitment illuminated dimensions of human nature, suffering, and moral obligation that remained invisible to rational analysis alone. His mathematical work took on deeper significance when viewed through religious understanding, revealing patterns of divine order and purpose that purely scientific investigation could never detect. Religious faith opened new insights into the meaning of human greatness and misery, showing how both point toward humanity's supernatural destiny. Faith is different from proof. The one is human, the other is a gift of God, Pascal notes, emphasizing how religious knowledge involves divine initiative working through human response rather than mere intellectual construction. The believer's transformed perspective makes previously hidden features of reality visible through what Pascal calls the eyes of faith. This transformation is not subjective projection, but genuine discovery of objective aspects of existence, accessible only through personal relationship and moral conversion. Pascal's own religious experience revealed understanding of divine love, human dignity, and ultimate purpose that proved more adequate to the full complexity of human existence than his previous purely rational approach. Religious knowledge addresses questions about meaning, destiny, and transcendent value that reason can raise but cannot answer, whilst reason provides essential tools for distinguishing authentic religious experience from superstition or self-deception. The heart has its order, the mind has its own, Pascal observes, showing how religious knowledge completes rather than contradicts rational investigation. Reason would never submit if it did not judge that there are some occasions on which it ought to submit. Religious understanding provides transcendent standards necessary for addressing ultimate questions about justice, meaning, and human destiny that purely secular analysis leaves perpetually unresolved, pointing toward the practical necessity of divine assistance for confronting the fundamental challenges of human existence. Part 10. Human society and the problem of justice. Pascal's penetrating analysis reveals why human societies inevitably fail to achieve perfect justice, beginning with our obvious limitations in knowledge of facts, circumstances, and consequences. We simply cannot know enough about complex situations to determine what true justice would require. When we attempt to adjudicate disputes or establish fair laws, we work with incomplete information about the relevant circumstances, limited understanding of the people involved, and no reliable way to foresee the consequences of our decisions. Pascal observed this fundamental epistemic limitation with characteristic clarity. Justice is subject to dispute. Might is easily recognized and is not disputed. So we cannot give might to justice, because might has gainsaid justice and has declared that it is she herself who is just. The very fact that reasonable people disagree about what justice demands in particular cases reveals how our cognitive limitations make perfect justice unattainable. We lack access to the complete picture that would be necessary for truly just judgment. Even if we possessed perfect knowledge, we would still lack the power to implement ideal solutions. Pascal's experience with his father's work as a tax commissioner gave him first-hand knowledge of how practical governance requires compromises between competing goods and the management of conflicting interests that resist ideal solutions. Limited resources mean that helping one group often requires disadvantaging another. Competing interests create situations where any decision will seem unjust to some parties. The complexity of human motivation means that even well-designed policies produce unintended consequences that create new injustices. Pascal recognized that we must have recourse to force when reason and persuasion prove insufficient. But force itself introduces an element that corrupts the purity of justice. The gap between moral ideals and practical possibilities ensures that even our best attempts at justice will fall short of perfection. The most fundamental limitation lies deeper still. We lack the virtue necessary for perfect justice. Even well-intentioned people are influenced by self-interest, prejudice, and partial perspectives that distort their judgment. Pascal's observation that man's nature is wholly corrupt captures not that humans are entirely evil, but that even our best intentions are mixed with self-serving motives we may not recognize. We systematically overestimate our own virtue and underestimate our bias, making us unreliable judges even in our own cases. Those who possess the power to enforce justice are themselves subject to the moral limitations that make perfect justice impossible. This creates a circular problem. The people responsible for creating and maintaining just institutions are precisely those whose moral limitations prevent perfect justice from being achieved. This triple limitation in knowledge, power, and virtue connects to Pascal's broader theological framework by revealing that perfect justice lies beyond human capacity and suggests the need for transcendent standards and divine assistance. The universal human longing for perfect justice, combined with our systematic inability to achieve it, points toward realities beyond finite human existence. As Pascal noted, without these divine mysteries, man is incomprehensible to himself. The very fact that we can conceive of perfect justice whilst being unable to implement it suggests that our moral aspirations transcend our natural capabilities. This recognition leads Pascal toward exploring how custom and social order, whilst imperfect, represent practical wisdom for working within human limitations, whilst acknowledging our ultimate dependence on transcendent foundations for any coherent understanding of justice itself. Pascal possessed an unusually penetrating eye for the conventional nature of what most people take to be natural or eternal. His analysis of social institutions reveals how much of what we assume reflects timeless principles of justice actually represents historical custom and convention. Custom is the whole of equity for the sole reason that it is accepted, he observes. That is the mystic foundation of its authority. This recognition emerged from his careful study of different legal and social systems in 17th century France, where he witnessed how inheritance laws, marriage customs, political structures, and economic arrangements varied dramatically between regions. Yet each community typically assumed their particular arrangements were natural or divinely ordained. Pascal's comparative analysis demonstrated that societies organized themselves according to fundamentally different principles, whilst their members remained convinced of the universal validity of their own systems. What appears as natural law in one province becomes arbitrary convention when viewed from another. The primogeniture that seems obviously just to the nobility appears manifestly unfair to younger sons. The commercial practices that merchants defend as rational economic principles strike agricultural communities as violations of proper social order. Through such observations, Pascal developed a sophisticated understanding of how social arrangements that feel inevitable and right to those within them reveal themselves as contingent historical developments when examined from sufficient distance. This recognition might seem to undermine social order entirely by revealing its arbitrary foundations and encouraging revolutionary reconstruction according to purely rational principles. Pascal was acutely aware that skeptical analysis of social customs could lead to the dangerous conclusion that all social arrangements are merely conventional and therefore subject to radical revision, according to abstract, rational ideals. The political upheavals of his era, including the Fronde civil wars that racked France during his youth, demonstrated how questioning traditional authority could lead to social chaos and violence rather than improved justice. Revolutionary fervor, however well-intentioned, often produced outcomes far worse than the imperfect systems it sought to replace. Pascal argues that custom provides necessary stability and order even when it lacks perfect rational justification, and that attempts at purely rational reconstruction typically create more problems than they solve. The art of revolution is to unsettle established customs, sounding them even to their source, to point out their want of authority and justice, he notes, recognizing both the intellectual appeal and practical danger of such enterprises. Existing institutions, however imperfect, embody accumulated wisdom about human nature and practical governance that abstract rational planning cannot easily replace. They represent countless small adjustments to human needs and limitations, refined through generations of experience in ways that purely theoretical approaches cannot anticipate. Revolutionary attempts to create perfectly rational societies typically fail to account for the complexity of human motivation and the unintended consequences of radical change. Pascal understood that human beings are not purely rational creatures who can be governed according to geometric principles. They are driven by habit, emotion, self-interest, and countless other factors that resist neat systematization. Social arrangements that appear irrational from a purely logical perspective may serve important psychological and practical functions that become apparent only when they are destroyed. The customs that seem arbitrary often provide the social cohesion and predictability necessary for human flourishing. Pascal's analysis of custom connects directly to his broader understanding of human nature and practical wisdom. It reflects appropriate humility about human rational capacity in complex social questions where perfect knowledge remains impossible. Pascal's analysis of human society reveals a fundamental problem that extends far beyond mere political theory into the very foundations of moral reasoning itself. When we examine what we mean by justice, Pascal argues, we discover that human societies cannot generate genuine standards of right and wrong from within their own conventional arrangements. Justice without might is helpless. Might without justice is tyrannical. This observation captures the essential dilemma of all human attempts to establish legitimate authority and fair social arrangements through purely human means. The arbitrariness of custom demonstrates this problem with striking clarity. Pascal observed how legal and moral practices vary dramatically across societies and historical periods, yet each society regards its own arrangements as natural and just. What appears as divine law in one culture becomes criminal behavior in another. What one generation considers moral progress, the next may view as corruption. This variation might suggest that justice is merely relative to particular societies. But Pascal draws the opposite conclusion. The very fact that we can recognize the arbitrariness of custom, that we can criticize existing arrangements and imagine better ones, reveals our access to standards that transcend any particular social order. Without such transcendent reference points, moral and political arguments inevitably reduce to conflicts of power rather than genuine disputes about justice and truth. Pascal's experience with the political and religious controversies of his era, particularly his devastating critique of Jesuit casuistry in the Provincial Letters, demonstrated how moral reasoning, without transcendent grounding, leads to relativism and manipulation. When religious authority loses connection to transcendent truth and becomes merely another form of human power, even the most sophisticated moral theology becomes a tool for justifying whatever serves institutional interests. Men never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from religious conviction, Pascal observed, showing how corrupted religious authority can be more dangerous than honest secular power. The universal human sense of moral obligation provides Pascal's strongest evidence for objective moral reality that transcends human creation. Across all cultures and historical periods, human beings experience genuine moral conflict, feeling obligated to standards that judge their natural inclinations and social arrangements. There is internal war in man between reason and the passions, Pascal noted, and this war itself demonstrates our access to moral truth that we did not create and cannot simply dismiss. The feeling that some things are genuinely right or wrong regardless of personal preference or social convention points toward moral reality as objective as mathematical truth, though accessible through different means. This analysis supports Pascal's broader theological framework by showing how the need for transcendent standards in social and political life parallels the need for transcendent meaning in individual existence. Both point toward divine reality as the foundation for human dignity and moral obligation. Without these divine mysteries, man is incomprehensible to himself, Pascal argued, because human nature contains aspirations and capacities that exceed what purely natural or social explanations can account for. Our ability to conceive of perfect justice, even whilst living in imperfect societies, reveals something about human nature that transcends natural evolution and social conditioning. Pascal's Christian vision provides not merely explanation for this human predicament, but practical resources for addressing the gap between human aspiration for justice and human capacity to achieve it through purely secular means. Divine grace offers what human reason and social organization cannot supply: genuine transformation of human nature that makes authentic justice possible, rather than merely conceivable. Part 11. The Christian Vision. Pascal's theological vision emerges from his philosophical analysis, as Christianity uniquely explains the paradox of human greatness and misery through the doctrines of creation and fall, providing a coherent account of human experience that purely philosophical alternatives cannot match. Where his psychological investigation revealed the fundamental duality of human nature, Christian doctrine offers the only framework capable of accounting for both aspects simultaneously without contradiction or reduction. What a chimera then is man! What a novelty! What a monster! What a chaos, Pascal declares, capturing the bewildering nature of human existence that demands explanation. His analysis reveals that humans possess genuine greatness, evidenced by our capacity for truth, justice, love, and transcendent aspiration, yet simultaneously experience profound misery through moral failure, existential restlessness, and the persistent gap between aspiration and achievement. Christianity explains this paradox through creation and fall. Humans are great because created in God's image for relationship with infinite goodness, but miserable because fallen from their intended state. The doctrine of creation accounts for authentic human greatness without inflating human capacity beyond its proper limits. Pascal argues that human dignity derives not from autonomous rational power, but from our original design for communion with divine truth and goodness. This explains why humans alone among creatures possess moral consciousness, seek absolute truth, and experience dissatisfaction with finite goods. Our greatness is real but derivative, grounded in our intended relationship with the infinite, rather than in independent human achievement. The doctrine of the fall explains human misery and moral failure without denying genuine human greatness or reducing humans to merely material beings. Pascal contends that humans are miserable because fallen from their intended state, retaining greatness but unable to achieve their true end through their own efforts alone. This theological framework illuminates the universal human experience of moral conflict that his analysis has revealed. We possess genuine moral capacity, yet consistently fail to achieve moral perfection. We seek truth yet remain vulnerable to error and self-deception. We aspire to happiness, yet find ourselves restless and dissatisfied. Man's greatness is so evident that it is even proved by his wretchedness, for what in animals is nature we call in man wretchedness, Pascal observes. The very fact that humans experience their limitations as misery rather than mere natural constraint demonstrates their greatness. Animals do not experience existential anxiety or moral guilt because they lack the transcendent capacity that constitutes human dignity. Human wretchedness paradoxically confirms human greatness by revealing our awareness of a higher standard we cannot achieve. This theological explanation accounts for human experience better than purely philosophical alternatives by explaining both aspects of the human paradox simultaneously. Pascal argues that Stoicism recognizes human greatness through its emphasis on rational dignity and moral capacity, but fails to account for genuine limitation and dependence, leading to pride and unrealistic expectations of human achievement. Materialism and skepticism recognize human limitation and vulnerability but fail to account for genuine moral capacity and transcendent aspiration, leading to despair or cynical reduction of human experience to mere biological process. Philosophical systems typically emphasize one aspect whilst ignoring the other, failing to provide adequate accounts of the full range of human experience that any complete worldview must address. Christianity alone explains why humans are simultaneously capable of moral heroism and moral failure, intellectual insight and persistent error, genuine love and destructive selfishness. Christianity, for Pascal, represents far more than an intellectual system or cultural tradition. It offers the only genuine remedy for the fundamental contradictions of human existence that his analysis has so thoroughly exposed. Where philosophy diagnoses the human condition as caught between misery and greatness, Christianity provides actual healing for both dimensions of this paradox. Pascal captures this precisely. The knowledge of God, without that of man's wretchedness, makes for pride. The knowledge of man's wretchedness without that of God makes for despair. The knowledge of Jesus Christ constitutes the middle course, because in him we find both God and our wretchedness. Divine redemption addresses not merely human ignorance, but human guilt, not merely human limitation, but human corruption. This remedy operates through what Pascal terms divine grace, which provides both forgiveness for moral failure and empowerment for authentic existence. Unlike philosophical solutions that remain purely theoretical, religious transformation produces observable changes in actual human behavior and priorities. Pascal's own conversion exemplifies this principle. His shift from purely intellectual faith to personal religious commitment fundamentally altered his relationship to knowledge, achievement, and other people. He abandoned his previous obsession with mathematical recognition and worldly success to pursue religious writing, spiritual direction, and service to the poor. This transformation wasn't merely emotional or social, but involved his entire approach to truth and reality. Pascal emphasizes that authentic religious experience transforms the whole person rather than simply providing intellectual answers or emotional comfort. Faith is different from proof. The one is human, the other is a gift of God. Religious transformation involves both intellectual illumination and moral renewal, enabling individuals to see reality more clearly whilst simultaneously empowering them to respond to that reality more authentically. Divine grace doesn't eliminate human limitation, but provides resources for living genuinely within those limitations, whilst oriented toward transcendent reality. The restoration of human nature through redemption specifically addresses the corruption of human capacities for truth, justice, and love that Pascal's analysis has identified. Sin has damaged but not destroyed these fundamental human abilities. Divine grace enables their recovery and proper functioning. Pascal's own experience demonstrates this principle. His encounter with divine love enabled him to pursue truth more courageously, love others more genuinely, and accept his own mortality more peacefully. The transformation wasn't escape from human condition, but authentic engagement with it. This understanding connects directly to Pascal's insight about the heart's knowledge. The heart has its reasons, which reason does not know. Religious experience provides access to realities that pure rationalism cannot reach, not by contradicting reason, but by completing it. Divine love addresses the infinite restlessness and longing that Pascal identified as fundamental to human nature. Relationship with infinite reality through grace provides the fulfillment that finite goods cannot supply. Pascal expresses this principle in his famous observation: "There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man, which cannot be filled by any created thing, but only by God." Human desire isn't eliminated through religious transformation, but directed toward its proper object. This redirection doesn't diminish human greatness, but enables its authentic expression through alignment with ultimate reality rather than futile attempts at self-sufficiency. Within Pascal's Christian vision, faith and reason emerge not as competing forces, but as complementary approaches to truth, each operating legitimately within its proper domain, whilst addressing fundamentally different types of questions about reality. His religious commitment, far from diminishing his appreciation for rational investigation, actually enhanced his understanding of reason's proper scope and limitations. Reason's last step is the recognition that there are an infinite number of things which are beyond it. It is but feeble if it does not see so far as to know this. This insight reveals how Pascal's mature philosophical position transcends the false dichotomy between blind faith and autonomous reason that plagued his contemporaries. Pascal's post-conversion work demonstrates how religious insight can inform intellectual endeavor without compromising rigorous standards. His continued mathematical innovations, scientific experiments, and logical arguments maintained the same precision and methodological care that characterized his earlier secular investigations. The difference lay not in reduced intellectual rigor, but in expanded understanding of what constitutes complete knowledge. His theological framework provided foundations for the moral obligations, transcendent aspirations, and infinite longings that his rational analysis had identified as fundamental to human experience, but could not adequately explain. Christian faith completes, rather than contradicts, reason's legitimate findings by addressing ultimate questions about meaning, purpose, and destiny that reason can raise but cannot definitively answer. Pascal recognized that we know truth not only by the reason, but also by the heart, establishing how religious knowledge operates through different but equally valid cognitive processes. The heart's intuitive grasp of divine reality does not bypass rational demonstration but operates alongside it, addressing dimensions of human experience that purely discursive reasoning cannot penetrate. This integration becomes particularly evident in Pascal's understanding of how religious experience validates philosophical conclusions about human nature's transcendent orientation. His own transformative encounter with divine reality, recorded in his memorial, with the recognition, forgetfulness of the world and of everything except God, confirmed what his rational analysis had suggested about human restlessness and the inadequacy of finite goods to satisfy infinite longings. Religious knowledge provided not merely additional information, but a fundamentally different mode of understanding that enabled more complete comprehension of human existence than either pure rationalism or pure fideism could achieve. Alone, Pascal's integrated approach offers enduring significance by providing a model for addressing contemporary conflicts between scientific and religious worldviews. His framework allows for rigorous intellectual honesty about what reason can and cannot establish, whilst remaining genuinely open to transcendent reality that addresses ultimate questions about human existence. Faith is different from proof. The one is human, the other is a gift of God. This distinction preserves the integrity of both rational demonstration and religious knowledge without reducing either to the other or creating artificial competition between them. Part 12. The Art of Persuasion and Human Communication. Pascal recognized something that his Enlightenment contemporaries preferred to ignore. The most consequential human decisions are never made through pure, logical reasoning alone. Whilst the age celebrated rational demonstration as the proper foundation for all human choice, Pascal observed a more complex reality. The heart has its reasons which reason does not know. He wrote, "We feel it in 1,000 things." This wasn't philosophical poetry, but empirical observation of how people actually navigate their most important decisions. Consider Pascal's own trajectory. His mathematical discoveries emerged through intuitive leaps that logic later confirmed. His religious conversion involved rational analysis, but also profound personal experience that resisted reduction to syllogistic form. His social relationships taught him that human beings respond to complex combinations of reason, emotion, self-interest, social influence, and lived experience. Pure logical demonstration, however elegant, captures only one dimension of this rich reality. This complexity isn't a failure of human rationality, but reflects the nature of the choices we actually face. The most important life decisions: whom to marry, what career to pursue, how to respond to moral obligations, whether to commit to religious faith, require integration of rational analysis with other forms of knowledge that logic alone cannot provide. These are decisions involving whole persons in concrete situations, not abstract problems amenable to mathematical proof. Pascal understood that we are as much automatic as intellectual. Habit, custom, and non-rational factors legitimately influence human decision-making because they carry information about our circumstances, relationships, and deepest commitments that pure reasoning might miss or discount. The person who attempts to live by logic alone acts like someone trying to navigate the world with only one sense functioning. Effective communication must therefore address the whole person through multiple channels. Pascal's provincial letters demonstrate sophisticated understanding of persuasion through humor, narrative, moral appeal, and logical argument working together rather than relying on abstract demonstration. His critique of Jesuit casuistry succeeded not merely through logical refutation, but by showing the human consequences of bad moral reasoning in concrete situations readers could understand and evaluate. This recognition of human complexity supports Pascal's broader philosophical project. When he argues that the heart has its own knowledge, he's not abandoning reason but acknowledging its proper limits and necessary partners. His insight that man is neither angel nor beast, and the misfortune is that he who would act the angel acts the beast, captures the danger of pretending we're purely rational creatures, when we're actually embodied beings whose decisions involve our whole selves. Genuine persuasion requires understanding and respecting where the listener currently stands, rather than simply presenting abstract arguments. Pascal learned that truth-telling involves meeting people in their actual situation, acknowledging their legitimate concerns, and showing how new understanding addresses their real needs rather than merely satisfying logical requirements. Pascal discovered through painful experience that brilliant arguments often fail to persuade, whilst modest insights, carefully presented, can transform minds. His early attempts at religious discussion taught him that the art of persuasion requires far more than logical demonstration. In The Art of Persuasion, he articulates this hard-won wisdom. The art of persuasion consists as much in that of pleasing as in that of convincing. So much more are men governed by caprice than by reason. This observation emerges not from cynicism about human nature, but from careful study of how understanding actually develops in real people facing real questions. Pascal recognized that effective communication begins with genuine attention to the listener's current position rather than abstract presentation of truths divorced from their concerns. His correspondence reveals a thinker who consistently adapts his approach to his audience's particular circumstances, temperament, and level of understanding. When writing to his sister Jacqueline about religious matters, he employs gentle encouragement and personal anecdote. When corresponding with the Duke of Roannes about spiritual questions, he begins with philosophical considerations that engage the Duke's intellectual interests before moving toward more personal applications. The provincial letters demonstrate this method brilliantly. Rather than attacking Jesuit casuistry with abstract moral principles, Pascal begins with shared moral intuitions that both his readers and his opponents would accept. He establishes common ground about the importance of moral integrity and genuine virtue before showing how specific Jesuit practices violate these shared commitments. This approach proves devastatingly effective precisely because it respects his audience's existing moral understanding whilst gradually revealing its implications. Pascal's method reflects both practical wisdom about human psychology and profound moral respect for human dignity. He understood that people cannot simply abandon their current framework of understanding without something better to replace it. Genuine persuasion requires patience to understand why people hold their current views and empathy to see the legitimate concerns those views address. This approach treats the listener as a fellow human being deserving respect, rather than an opponent to be defeated through superior argument. This principle extends beyond philosophical discussion to religious evangelism, where Pascal insisted that effective witness requires genuine concern for the other person's welfare rather than mere desire to win converts. His spiritual direction reveals a man who carefully attends to individual circumstances, never applying formulaic approaches. He observes that we must know where to doubt, where to feel certain, where to submit, recognizing that effective communication requires wisdom about what can be demonstrated rationally and what must be accepted through other forms of commitment. Pascal's approach to persuasion connects directly to his broader understanding of human knowledge and the heart's role in grasping truth. Meeting people where they are requires the kind of intuitive understanding that grasps individual persons in their concrete situations, rather than treating them as abstract, rational agents. This heart knowledge enables us to see not just what arguments might logically convince someone, but what concerns, fears, and hopes actually motivate their thinking. Pascal discovered through his own spiritual journey and observation of human nature that effective communication of important truths requires genuine love for those we seek to persuade, not merely intellectual skill or rhetorical technique. His insight cuts to the heart of why so much human discourse fails to achieve its intended purpose. When we wish to correct with advantage and to show another that he errs, we must notice from what side he views the matter, for on that side it is usually true, Pascal observed, recognizing that successful persuasion begins with understanding and respecting the listener's perspective rather than simply asserting our own position. This principle emerged from Pascal's direct experience with religious conversion and his careful study of effective spiritual direction. He witnessed how attempts at persuasion that relied solely on logical argument or emotional manipulation consistently failed to produce lasting transformation. The human person, Pascal understood, is not merely a rational calculator to be convinced through superior reasoning, nor simply an emotional being to be swayed through passionate appeals. Genuine persuasion must address the whole person, acknowledging both the dignity of human reason and the deeper movements of the heart that ultimately determine our fundamental commitments. Love transforms the entire approach to communication by making the listener's genuine welfare rather than the speaker's satisfaction. Pascal's provincial letters demonstrate this principle brilliantly. His devastating critique of Jesuit casuistry was motivated not by desire for intellectual victory over theological opponents, but by profound concern for the spiritual welfare of ordinary Catholics who were being misled by sophisticated but morally corrupting reasoning. Pascal's satirical brilliance served a fundamentally charitable purpose, exposing dangerous errors precisely because he loved those who were being deceived by them. Genuine love in communication requires extraordinary patience with human limitation, deep respect for human freedom, and humble willingness to accept that persuasion may take time and may ultimately depend on factors beyond the communicator's control. Pascal recognized that authentic conviction cannot be forced or manufactured through clever techniques. It must emerge from the listener's own recognition of truth, supported by grace that no human communicator can provide. This understanding prevents the communicator from becoming frustrated when immediate results do not follow even the most skillful presentation of important truths. Without genuine love, communication inevitably becomes manipulation that treats other persons as objects to be controlled rather than subjects to be respected and served. Pascal observed that purely tactical approaches to persuasion, however sophisticated, ultimately fail because they violate human dignity and create resistance rather than genuine conviction. When we approach others with hidden agendas or view them merely as targets for our influence, we corrupt the communication process itself. The listener intuitively senses this instrumental attitude and responds with defensive resistance, even when the truths being presented are objectively valid and important. Pascal's insight that the heart has its reasons which reason does not know illuminates why authentic communication must address the heart, as well as the mind, which requires genuine care for the person rather than mere desire to change their opinions. The deepest human convictions emerge from the integration of rational understanding with the heart's recognition of value and meaning. This integration cannot be achieved through purely intellectual argument or emotional manipulation, but only through communication that respects and serves the listener's authentic search for truth and meaning. This principle connects to Pascal's broader understanding of human relationships and moral obligation, reflecting the self-transcendent love that he identified as evidence of human greatness. Part 13. Pascal's legacy. Pascal's intellectual achievement extends far beyond his mathematical discoveries or theological insights. He crafted a sophisticated philosophical position that offers a genuine alternative to two approaches that dominated his era and continue to shape contemporary debates about knowledge and belief. Pure rationalism, exemplified by thinkers like Descartes, claims that all important truths can be established through logical demonstration alone. Pascal saw this as a dangerous overextension of reason beyond its proper domain. Descartes useless and uncertain, he declared, recognizing that the rationalist project of grounding all knowledge in clear and distinct ideas ultimately fails to address the deepest questions of human existence. The opposite extreme, fideism, abandons reason entirely and reduces religious commitment to blind faith or arbitrary choice. This position makes belief vulnerable to superstition and fanaticism, whilst offering no criteria for distinguishing genuine religious insight from mere enthusiasm or delusion. Pascal's rigorous intellectual standards could not accept such an abdication of critical thinking, yet he recognized that pure rationalism left vast territories of human experience unexplored and unexplained. Pascal's third way affirms reason's validity within its legitimate sphere, whilst recognizing the heart and religious experience as equally valid sources of knowledge about different aspects of reality. This position allows for rigorous intellectual work in mathematics, science, and logical analysis whilst remaining open to transcendent realities that address ultimate questions about meaning, purpose, and human destiny. We know truth not only by the reason, but also by the heart, and it is in this last way that we know first principles, Pascal observed. This integration avoids both the arrogance of claiming rational omniscience and the irresponsibility of abandoning intellectual rigor. The sophistication of Pascal's approach becomes clear when we recognize that acknowledging reason's limits is itself a rational position. His mathematical training gave him unique insight into the structure of knowledge and the relationship between demonstration and first principles that cannot themselves be demonstrated. Even in geometry, the most rigorous of sciences, we must begin with axioms that are intuitively grasped rather than logically proven. The ultimate end of reason is to recognize that there are an infinite number of things which surpass it, Pascal noted. This recognition enables appropriate confidence within reason's domain, whilst maintaining intellectual humility about ultimate questions. Pascal's integrated approach enables both rigorous intellectual honesty and profound religious commitment, without forcing them into separate compartments or artificial conflict. His own life demonstrated the possibility of being simultaneously a serious mathematician, a careful scientist, a penetrating psychologist, and a committed Christian without intellectual compromise in any area. This synthesis forms a coherent worldview rather than competing allegiances, showing how mathematical precision, scientific method, psychological insight, and religious commitment can mutually illuminate rather than undermine each other. Pascal's intellectual legacy reveals something remarkable. The same rigorous honesty that drove his mathematical discoveries and scientific breakthroughs led him inexorably toward religious faith. This unity appears paradoxical to modern minds trained to separate scientific rationality from religious commitment. Yet Pascal demonstrates how the deepest thinking, pursued with complete intellectual integrity, points toward, rather than away from transcendence. His mathematical work with probability theory directly informed his approach to religious commitment in the famous wager. The decision-making framework he developed for situations of uncertainty, weighing potential outcomes against their likelihood, became the foundation for his analysis of religious belief. Pascal recognized that religious commitment, like all significant human decisions, must be made without complete certainty. Yet this uncertainty does not eliminate the possibility of rational choice. The same mathematical precision that revealed patterns in games of chance illuminated the logic of spiritual commitment. His scientific investigations into atmospheric pressure and the nature of vacuum taught him profound lessons about the limits of human knowledge. When Pascal demonstrated that nature does not actually abhor a vacuum, he learned that reality often contradicts our intuitive assumptions. This scientific humility prepared him for religious insights that similarly challenged conventional expectations. The intellectual honesty that forced him to abandon comfortable scientific assumptions about nature's preferences prepared him to question comfortable assumptions about human self-sufficiency. Pascal observed that we must know where to doubt, where to feel certain, where to submit. This principle governed every aspect of his intellectual work. In mathematics, he submitted to logical necessity whilst doubting unproven assumptions. In science, he felt certain about experimental results whilst doubting theoretical speculations beyond empirical reach. In religious matters, he submitted to divine authority whilst doubting human claims to comprehensive understanding. The same intellectual discipline operated across all domains. His analysis of human nature as positioned between two infinites, the infinitely large cosmos and the infinitely small particle, applies equally to every form of human knowledge. In mathematics, we grasp genuine truths whilst recognizing that infinite complexity lies beyond our reach. In scientific investigation, we discover real patterns whilst acknowledging that ultimate explanations remain elusive. In psychological understanding, we penetrate genuine insights about human motivation whilst recognizing the mystery that remains at the heart of consciousness. In religious commitment, we encounter authentic divine reality whilst accepting that God's nature transcends complete comprehension. Pascal's anthropological principle, that man is neither angel nor beast, shapes his approach to every intellectual question. Humans possess genuine rational capacities that distinguish us from mere animals, yet we lack the comprehensive understanding that would make us godlike. This middle position enables real knowledge whilst demanding intellectual humility. The same principle that prevents scientific dogmatism supports religious faith. We know enough to recognize our need for transcendence, yet not enough to achieve it through reason alone. His Night of Fire experience confirmed through direct encounter what his philosophical analysis had suggested through rational investigation. The memorial records certitude, feeling, joy, peace. Religious experience provided intellectual satisfaction as well as emotional fulfillment precisely because it completed rather than contradicted his rational investigations. The God encountered in mystical experience was the same God whose existence his philosophical arguments had made probable. Pascal's enduring significance lies in demonstrating that intellectual rigor, pursued without compromise, leads toward rather than away from religious faith. Pascal's analysis of human nature possesses an uncanny contemporary relevance that transcends its 17th century origins. His penetrating insights into fundamental human restlessness, the search for authentic existence, and the relationship between scientific knowledge and ultimate meaning speak directly to our current concerns about technology, materialism, and the search for purpose in increasingly secular societies. When Pascal observed that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone, he anticipated with remarkable prescience contemporary discussions about anxiety, distraction, and the profound difficulty of authentic self-reflection. This insight illuminates why, despite unprecedented material prosperity and technological advancement, modern societies continue to grapple with questions of meaning, purpose, and genuine satisfaction that Pascal identified as central to the human condition. His analysis of diversion and the flight from self-knowledge speaks with prophetic clarity to modern concerns about technology, entertainment, and authentic existence. Pascal understood how people use constant activity to avoid confronting existential questions, a psychological mechanism that anticipates contemporary concerns about social media, entertainment, culture, and the difficulty of sustained reflection in information-saturated societies. His understanding of the psychological functions of diversion illuminates current discussions about addiction, anxiety, and the search for meaning in consumer culture. The very technologies that promise connection and fulfillment often serve the diversionary function Pascal identified, keeping us perpetually engaged with external stimuli whilst avoiding the fundamental questions about our nature and destiny that demand serious contemplation. Pascal's wager continues to provoke sophisticated discussion about rational decision-making under uncertainty, particularly relevant in an era where scientific advancement has not eliminated ultimate questions about meaning and purpose. His approach to religious commitment as a reasonable decision under conditions of uncertainty speaks to contemporary people who cannot achieve the certainty that either traditional religious authority or scientific materialism sometimes claims to provide. Modern discussions in decision theory, risk assessment, and the relationship between evidence and commitment in both scientific and religious contexts often return to principles Pascal established. His recognition that we must make fundamental life decisions without complete information remains as relevant today as it was 3 centuries ago. Pascal's enduring relevance stems from his integration of rigorous thinking with deep spiritual commitment, offering a model for navigating contemporary intellectual and spiritual challenges. His refusal to choose between scientific rationality and religious faith, between intellectual rigor and spiritual depth, provides resources for addressing the false dichotomies that often characterize contemporary discussions about science and religion. His insight that the heart has its reasons which reason does not know remains relevant for anyone seeking to integrate different forms of knowledge and commitment in addressing the fundamental questions that define human existence. Pascal demonstrates that intellectual honesty and spiritual depth need not be antagonistic, that the deepest questions about human existence require both rigorous analysis and profound commitment, both scientific precision and spiritual wisdom. Part 14. Conclusion. Pascal's philosophical vision emerges as a remarkable synthesis that addresses the deepest questions of human existence through an integration of rigorous reason, psychological insight, and spiritual commitment. His genius lies in recognizing that human beings are complex creatures, requiring multiple forms of knowledge to navigate reality effectively. We know truth, not only by the reason, but also by the heart, and it is in this last way that we know first principles, Pascal observed, articulating a sophisticated epistemology that avoids the reductionism characterizing both pure rationalism and pure empiricism, whilst maintaining rigorous intellectual standards. This integration proves essential because mathematical reason, whilst powerful for understanding the natural world, cannot address questions of value, meaning, and ultimate purpose that define human existence. Intuitive insight grasps first principles and moral truths that reason presupposes but cannot prove. Religious faith addresses ultimate questions about human destiny and transcendent reality that neither geometric reasoning nor psychological analysis can resolve. Pascal's vision honors each domain whilst recognizing their proper scope and limitations. His anthropological analysis reveals humans as beings caught between infinites, possessing genuine greatness through thought and love, whilst remaining fundamentally limited and dependent. Man is only a reed, the weakest in nature, but he is a thinking reed, Pascal noted, capturing this essential duality. We achieve remarkable things through scientific discovery and moral heroism, yet we remain prone to self-deception and moral failure. This understanding of human nature as simultaneously great and miserable provides the foundation for his arguments about the reasonableness of religious commitment and the inadequacy of purely secular approaches to human fulfillment. The integration of rigorous intellectual honesty with profound spiritual commitment demonstrates that the deepest thinking leads not away from, but toward recognition of mystery and transcendence. Pascal's own intellectual journey from mathematical prodigy to religious mystic shows how his Night of Fire experience confirmed rather than contradicted his philosophical analysis. God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not of the philosophers and of the learned, he wrote in his Memorial, indicating how religious commitment enhanced, rather than diminished, his intellectual work by providing foundations for moral obligation and ultimate meaning that pure rationalism cannot supply. Pascal's enduring significance lies in demonstrating that we need not choose between scientific rationality and religious faith, between intellectual rigor and spiritual depth. His vision of human flourishing honors both our rational capacities and our deepest longings for meaning, love, and transcendence. The heart has its reasons which reason does not know, he observed, offering guidance for anyone seeking to integrate different forms of knowledge in addressing ultimate questions. This principle provides a sophisticated framework for understanding how intuitive insight, rational analysis, and religious commitment can work together rather than in opposition. Pascal's model of the thinking person who remains open to mystery provides resources for navigating intellectual and spiritual challenges across historical periods. His insights remain as relevant today as they were in 17th century France because the fundamental questions he addressed about knowledge, human nature, meaning, and transcendence persist as central concerns for anyone seeking to understand their place in reality and live with integrity and purpose.